Hey guys, I'm Urizi. This story is all about what if Naruto was the son of a goddess. Kurama had a jutsu to save him. The only problem? It didn't quite work as intended. And now Naruto is reborn in a world where gods and monsters roam the lands. Thankfully, this time around, he has a mother with the most striking silver eyes, the same color as the moon. Before we proceed with the story, please like and subscribe to this channel if you liked the video, and don't forget to check the description for the other works of the author if you liked the story. Let's start. Chapter 9, Atlas. Hey, Zoe. Percy cautiously looked behind them. You know that the sidewalk is for walking, not driving, right? Several pedestrians yelled curses after them, having narrowly avoided being hit, and some were pulling out their phones, presumably to call the police. Zoe cast a glance at him. We have no time to waste. Regrouping with Naruto is our biggest priority right now. Hey, you don't need to worry about boss, the shadow clone spoke up. He'll be fine on his own. Zoe looked amused. Trust me, I'm not worried about Naruto. I simply do not wish to wait in traffic any longer. The faster we regroup, the faster we can try to figure out how to reach the summit. Perhaps if Naruto asked for Apollo's help in lowering the mist. Mist? Percy frowned. What does the mist have to do with anything? Zoe stared at Percy incredulously. Has Chiron not taught you anything yet? What do you guys even do at Camp Half-Blood? Don't worry, it's just Percy, Thalia smirked. She had fully reverted back to her old self. Thank the gods for demigods' short attention span. For someone who's best friends with a child of Athena, he can be remarkably dense. Hey. Percy, how do you think the gods lifted the summit of Mount Othris out of this reality? Thalia asked. Magic. Came the eloquent reply. Thalia rolled her eyes. Everything we do is magic, Percy. The gods used the mist. I thought the mist was only a superficial illusion that prevented mortals from seeing godly stuff. Percy frowned. You're right, Thalia nodded. But that is only one of the mist's functions. How do you think Olympus formed over the Empire State Building? Percy blinked. Magic. I'm not even going to dignify that with a reply. It formed out of the mist, Percy, Thalia explained. Don't ask me how the exact process works, I don't think anyone truly knows though. You know how the Greek gods shifted with the heart of Western civilization. Zoe took over from Thalia. How do you think everything transferred over? There wasn't a team of builders or anything. The Sea of Monsters, the Lotus Casino, DOA recording studios. They were all automatically created, or rather, recreated, by the mist. The Lotus Casino. Bianca suddenly spoke up, her eyes wide with what appeared to be fear. Zoe looked over. Yeah. Why? She asked in concern when she saw Bianca's terrified look. It's nothing, Bianca looked away. Never mind. Zoe frowned but continued. At any rate, not only could the mist be used to change reality, but it could also be used to separate reality into different dimensions. Reality has different layers, and it's possible to move one part of reality to a different layer, in other words, lift a location out of the normal space-time. It's extremely rare though, and it takes a lot of energy. You need several major gods working together to accomplish it. Percy made a sound of comprehension. I see. So when we went to the Lotus Casino, it was lifted out of the normal flow of time, right? Bianca drew in a sharp breath. Thalia nodded. Yup, although it still existed in the normal space, which is why you could enter and exit it like normal. It wasn't done by a god though, the process was entirely automatic. Indeed. A location can exist in a different space, time, or both, Zoe elaborated. For example, the Garden of Hesperides originally didn't follow the normal flow of time, it existed in a state of perpetual twilight. Anyone could walk inside, it's just that once they entered, the time would change. After the gods manipulated the mist, however, the garden was lifted out of the normal space as well, so the only way for someone to enter is during twilight when the garden returned to normal space. When you say the Lotus Casino was lifted out the normal flow of time, Bianca began hesitantly, what do you mean by that? Percy glanced over. Grover, Annabeth, his face darkened slightly, and I were trapped there during our first quest to retrieve the Master Bolt. We stayed for about an hour, but when we came out, 5 days had passed outside. Bianca paled substantially. Zoe noticed. What is it? Bianca looked down at her lap. Nico and I stayed at the Lotus Casino for several weeks. A silence descended over them all. Percy snapped his fingers. That explains why you didn't know who Spider-Man was. Thalia shot him a dirty look. What? Percy said defensively. Not the time, she hissed. Bianca, Zoe began cautiously, who is the current president? Bianca told them the correct president. And who was the president before that? Zoe asked. FDR, Bianca responded. Another silence. Bianca, Zoe said gently. FDR was not the last president. That was about 70 years ago. Bianca's eyes became suspiciously bright. Oh. She looked down at her hands, as if she was afraid that they'd suddenly start wrinkling and turn gray. I'm. She trailed off. I'm not that old, she whispered. Thalia's gaze softened. It's okay, Bianca. You're still a normal 12-year-old daughter of Hades. Don't look at things chronologically, we live in Greek myths. Grover is in his 20s, Percy added. But satyrs age slower than humans. Don't worry too much about it. Bianca nodded slowly. Yeah. You're right. Sorry, I'm just a little shocked. She smiled at them. Don't worry, I'm fine. Apollo can lower the mist. Naruto spoke up suddenly. Zoe hesitated. I admit, I don't really know. Perhaps he can. However, I'm fairly certain that only the Elder Olympians have the jurisdiction to alter the mist on the mountain. But if you asked Apollo to ask Zeus to temporarily let us through. Got it, the clone nodded. Speaking of which, we're here, Zoe slammed on the brakes. They stopped at the base of a cluster of mountains. Finally, Thalia said. It only took, 3 traffic accidents. Zoe nodded. The mortal police are after us. What? I'm not surprised you didn't notice. Thy situational awareness is atrocious. I manipulated the mist to make them go away temporarily, but they're probably back to their senses by now. Zoe stepped on the accelerator once more. So we should hurry. The roads were insanely narrow, winding through forests and up the sides of hills and around the edges of steep ravines. Zoe didn't slow down at all, in fact, she seemed to go even faster. Dear Zeus! Thalia yelped as they narrowly avoided being plunged into a ravine by mere inches. Zoe, the brakes are meant to be used. You're supposed to lift your foot off the accelerator. Amateur, Zoe muttered. Hey Naruto, do you know where thy boss is? He's up the mountain, Naruto answered. They were in the forest, and he once again had access to his godlike senses and perfect awareness. Surprisingly, it was the exact same as when he had entered Sage Mode. Naruto's eyebrows furrowed in thought. Perhaps. Whenever he was in a forest, Artemis's domain, her energy passively flowed into him, augmenting his abilities. However, in Sage Mode, Naruto was actively drawing upon her energy, which had the same effects. Which was why whenever he was in Sage Mode, it was as if he was in a forest. That was pretty cool. As they passed a scenic curve, Percy suddenly exclaimed, Guys! They looked out the window. There was a big white ship docked at the beach. A cruise ship. The Shadow Clone frowned. He hadn't sensed it. Although that was probably because it was still in the ocean, and therefore still in Poseidon's domain. Luke's ship, Thalia hissed. The Princess Andromeda. Bianca blinked. What's wrong with that ship? It's owned by Luke, a traitor, Percy explained grimly. On board, there are a lot of monsters and enemy demigods. We will have company, then, Zoe announced. Thalia grinned. Perfect. I've been wanting to let off some steam ever since Naruto defeated all those mortal mercenaries when Thorn attacked without letting us do a single thing. Percy nodded. No offense, Naruto, but that wasn't a really nice move. I had been ready to destroy all the mercenaries with an awesome water attack, but then you swooped in with your sage mode thing. I mean, at least let us have some of the fun, you know. Thalia agreed. Ah, my bad, Naruto apologized sincerely. I'm pretty sure boss just wanted to take care of it quickly. Wait, Percy, Thalia, are you saying that we were fine against those mercenaries with guns? Bianca asked. Well, yeah, Percy confirmed. I don't know what Thorn was thinking, or if he was even thinking at all. Sure, they have guns, but we're faster than bullets. Besides, I'm the son of Poseidon, and we were right next to the water. Thalia nodded. Percy and I had been a second away from defeating them all when Naruto beat us to it. Bianca, don't you remember? Zoe had an amused smile on her face. We can literally intercept the bullets in midair with our arrows. Bianca flushed. Oh. Right. Naruto rubbed the back of his head awkwardly. Yeah. Sorry guys. I think boss just underestimated you all. Thalia rolled her eyes. Don't tell me. He bought our scared act. Naruto stared. You guys were acting scared. But boss was acting scared too. Percy broke out into a grin. You mean that all of us were pretending to be scared and weak to get them to drop their guard, but we believed each other's acting? Naruto chuckled. It appears so. Bianca began tentatively. Oh. Don't worry, you're still new, Percy hastily reassured. I was super freaked out at everything too when I first found out I was a demigod. Give it some time. Zoe nodded. It's one of the reasons why I took you on this quest. I wished for you to gain experience. Once you have enough experience and knowledge, situations like with the mortal mercenaries won't even faze you. Bianca nodded. Yeah, you guys were all so calm and confident on this quest while I... She trailed off. Thalia smiled in understanding. We were all like that when we first began. What's important is that you stuck through and didn't freeze up in fear or run away. Above all, you didn't give up, Naruto grinned. And that's what truly matters. It was a calm afternoon for the denizens of San Francisco. There was a bustling crowd of tourists taking pictures of random street corners and unwittingly holding up pedestrians. If they were attentive, they would see a man and a woman sitting outside of a cafe. The man was scruffy and looked homeless, and the woman was absolutely gorgeous. And if they were really attentive, they would have noticed the seething rage in the man's eye. They're going to do what now? Apollo snarled in pure, unadulterated rage. Selene nodded. You heard me. Heat and energy radiated off of Apollo in waves as his eyes glowed golden in rage and fury. If it weren't for the mist obscuring them, they would be getting a lot of fearful looks. I'm going to kill them all. Selene chuckled. I doubt you can. Something dark lurked in Apollo's eyes. You'd be surprised at what I can do when my little sister is in danger. He paused. No, danger would be an understatement. Immortal jeopardy is more like it. You're strong, Apollo, Selene said soothingly. But even you can't defeat Atlas in one-on-one combat. He's old, Apollo muttered. Spent several thousand years in a cramped-up position. I can take him. Selene sighed. Apollo, I didn't tell you all of this so you would rush off foolhardily in a desperate attempt to save Artemis. Yeah, well, that's exactly what is going to happen because I have no backup. Selene blinked. What do you mean? Apollo sighed and leaned back in his chair. Zeus ordered a blanket ban on helping the quest members for the gods. I'm only here because I'm incognito. But none of the other gods are coming. For the first time in about 100 years, Selene broke her calm composure. Are you serious? She asked incredulously. This is Atlas we're talking about. Even the gods would have trouble taking him down. And Zeus expects mere demigods to do the job. Exactly. Apollo declared. He sighed tiredly. So yeah. As far as I'm concerned, I'm the only god down here right now about to help the demigods. Athena is staying back until she has more information. She said something about not walking into an obvious trap, and the other gods are too apathetic to storm the mountain. Selene was silent for a moment, taking in the new information. The situation is worse than I had anticipated. Apollo nodded grimly. At least you're here. Selene opened her mouth but he suddenly grinned. So, you're a double agent now, huh? Selene rolled her eyes. Please don't call me that. I have no idea why the Titans thought that I would be on their side. They probably guessed that I would resent Artemis for taking away my domain of the moon. Apollo snorted. I thought Prometheus was supposed to be smart. Hey, so how do you feel about being called 007? Selene silenced him with a glare. Focus, Apollo. Avoiding the topic isn't going to make it go away. He became serious again. You're right. My bad. So how are we going to save Artemis? I already know that the demigods are driving up the mountain right now and Naruto is already in the garden and presumably going up to the summit. Selene blinked. How did the kid get in? I thought you had to be a god to be able to navigate past the mist like that. To be honest, I don't really know, Apollo admitted. Although he's not mortal, so that might explain it. He snapped his fingers. Speaking of which, the other demigods also have to enter the garden. I'll have to ask Father to temporarily lift the mist and allow them through. You do that. Anyway, to save Artemis, we have to end things before Atlas enters his divine form. Selene steepled her fingers together. Once he's trapped under the sky, he'll be unable to enter, but until then, the only thing holding him back is his pride. Apollo nodded. I doubt he'll use his divine form against a bunch of demigods. So I guess we should. There is no we, Selene interrupted. What? That's what I tried to tell you earlier, Selene sighed. I can't fight. Apollo stared. But I need you with me. I'm sorry, Selene whispered. But I'm weak now. I don't stand a chance against Atlas anymore. Hell, I think even you can defeat me without much difficulty. That's impossible, Apollo shook his head. You once single-handedly held off Typhon for several hours before he finally incapacitated you. That was eons ago. But after I gave up my domain. Selene shrugged helplessly. I gained a lot from letting Artemis take over my duty, but in doing so, I also lost much of my power. Sorry, Apollo, but you're alone on this one. Apollo muttered out some Greek curses. I'll pretend I didn't hear that. Apollo stood up. Very well. I have to go. Selene smiled. Good luck. Go save your little sister. I will, Apollo answered with a fiery determination. And his gaze softened. Thank you. Then, in a flash of golden light, he was gone. Selene watched him go with a sad smile. She would probably be targeted by the Titans for betraying them, but that was fine. She may have failed in saving her brother, but she'll be damned if she let history repeat itself with the new twin gods of the sun and the moon. Her eyebrows raised as she caught sight of a golden MP3 player on the table. Did Apollo leave it behind for her? Intrigued, Selene pressed the play button and the music drifted up to her ears. She couldn't help it. She laughed when the James Bond theme began playing from the tiny speakers. Helios. Your successor. He's a lot like you. I wonder, would you have liked him? If Naruto didn't know any better, he would have sworn that he was just teleported to a different mountain. Naruto's intuition sputtered a bit at the sudden change before new information streamed into Naruto's mind once more. Day became twilight and, instead of an empty clearing, Naruto found himself in the most beautiful garden he had ever seen. The grass shimmered with silvery evening light, and the flowers were such brilliant colors they almost glowed in the dark. A 100-headed dragon, Laden, was coiled around a 5-story tall apple tree with golden apples that smelled amazing. Above Naruto, the partly cloudy sky vanished and an angry storm replaced it. Dense gray clouds swirled continuously around the peak of the mountain and the temperature of the mountain seemed to drop by 20 degrees. Who are you? A voice demanded. Naruto shifted his gaze to see 4 figures staring at him confusedly. 4 young women that greatly resembled Zoe. They all wore white Greek chitons and had caramel skin. Silky black hair tumbled loose around their shoulders. The Hesperides. Naruto wasn't dealing with this. Within a second, he sprinted out of the garden with only a faint after-image left behind. Lawton didn't even have enough time to react. As he exited the garden, twilight became day again. It appeared that only the garden existed in a state of perpetual twilight. Mount Othrys followed the same time as the outside world and only existed in a different space. There was a single rocky trail leading up to the black peak of the mountain. Naruto ignored it, instead simply tree jumping. His eyes darted around, prepared for an ambush or attack, but it appeared that nobody noticed him. Apparently, they were confident enough in the mist keeping everyone out. At any rate, he was quickly brought out of his thoughts when he reached the top of the mountain. Ruins littered the area. Half-formed blocks of black marble. Broken columns. Statues of bronze that looked as though they'd been half-melted. The ruins of Othrys, the mountain fortress of the Titans. This was bad. According to Apollo, Othrys was blasted to pieces in the Titan War, reduced to nothing but dust. But now, it was slowly reforming from the mist in the same process as when Olympus formed over New York. Shifting with the heart of civilization and rising from old but not forgotten memories. Growing with the increase in the Titan's power. The ruins around Naruto was nothing more but a streak as he rushed past. He could sense Artemis up ahead along with several other presences. A Rasengan formed in his hand. No. A Rasengan wouldn't be enough, it barely even scratched Apollo. Against Atlas. Naruto reached the summit and his heart stopped at the sight. Gray clouds swirled in a heavy vortex, making a funnel cloud that almost touched the mountaintop, but instead rested on the shoulders of Artemis, her legs bound to the rock with celestial bronze chains. She was holding up the sky itself. And judging from the sweat drenching her form and how her entire body trembled under the weight, she was in massive pain. Next to her, a man wearing a brown silk suit reclined in a soft leather couch. He had a book in his hand but he wasn't reading it, instead, he was talking to Artemis, a smirk on his face, obviously enjoying her pain. He radiated pure power on a level Naruto had never felt before. Naruto's muscles tensed up unconsciously as his instincts sent him warnings after warnings, telling him that this man was dangerous. This was a Titan who had lived for millennia. Older than Madara, older than the Sage of Six Paths, older than even Kaguya herself. This was a Titan who had seen the rise of mankind and would probably see the fall. Atlas. The general of the Titan army. But right now, he was none of those. At that moment, to Naruto, Atlas was nothing but someone who was hurting his mother. Naruto could accept many things. This was not one of them. Futon, Raisin Shuriken. Atlas whirled around the instant Naruto appeared in his field of vision, but he was too slow. The Raisin Shuriken flew towards him, a rotating shuriken of pure wind, coated in a layer of senjutsu chakra to maintain the shape even after it was thrown. Unlike before, however, the Raisin Shuriken emitted a bright purple-silver light. Naruto's eyes widened in realization. His senjutsu chakra was a combination of his own chakra and the natural energy of Artemis. Which meant that the silver light was Artemis's divine power. The Raisin Shuriken slammed into Atlas's chest and blew him back, slamming him into a large black marble column a solid 20 feet away from Artemis. Atlas roared in pain and surprise as chakra and divine power worked together to obliterate him on a microscopic level and the column behind him cracked from the force. Then the central sphere of the Raisin Shuriken detonated, producing a massive vortex of wind and unleashing millions of blades of wind and tiny shards of silver light. Atlas let out another roar that was drowned out by the sound of the explosion. The column was completely destroyed, releasing a puff of black dust that obscured Atlas's battered body from view. Naruto smirked. That should keep Atlas down for a couple minutes. Naruto. Artemis gasped out, her voice strained. Naruto was by her side immediately. Mom. Are you okay? What are you doing here? Fear filled Artemis's voice. Run. Naruto smiled as he quickly cut through the chains binding her. Don't worry. Naruto, a deep voice mused. The force of the voice seemed to make the ground underneath them vibrate, as if the earth itself was talking. The mysterious newcomer to Camp Half-Blood. Atlas strolled out from the cloud of black dust calmly, rubbing at his shoulder. Naruto gaped at the sight. Golden ichor dripped out of a few cuts on his chest, but other than that, Atlas looked completely fine. Even as Naruto watched, the cuts on Atlas's chest healed up until he looked as good as new, albeit with an extremely ripped suit. A cruel smile spread across Atlas's face. I have to thank you for doing that, Naruto. Slamming me into the column like that did wonders for my back. Released a little bit of the tension. How? Naruto asked in disbelief. Your cells were damaged on the microscopic level. You should have been incapacitated for at least half a minute. Atlas raised his eyebrows. Kid, I'm not a human, he answered simply. Your kind is too fragile and weak. I am a titan, not only that, but I am the titan of endurance and strength. Atlas smiled. Now then, I'm glad you came. We have much to discuss. Son of Artemis. But before that, please get rid of that illusion. Talk to me face to face. Naruto paused before allowing the henge to dispel. There was no point in maintaining it anymore. Atlas's smile grew as he took in Naruto's appearance. Interesting. You know, Artemis, he looks a lot like you. I wonder what you'll do when I kill him. Will you cry? I think you will, you gods are the sentimental sort. Artemis narrowed her eyes. Touch him, and you will die. Ah, how cute. Atlas walked forward, a Stygian iron spear appearing in his hand out of nowhere. It's almost as if you care. Unless, don't tell me. Could it be? Does little Artemis actually care about her son? His voice took on a mocking lilt as he twirled the spear around. Naruto, please, run, Artemis whispered. You can't fight him. Naruto didn't move as Atlas stopped a few meters in front of them, his spear resting casually on his shoulder. Naruto stood absolutely still, gazing off into the distance. Then his eyes focused and determination roared to life within them. I thought I already told you. I don't run. Atlas laughed, a deep bass sound that echoed through the ruins. That's adorable. Say, Naruto, how do you feel about joining the Titan army? Naruto blinked. What? We have excellent benefits, Atlas said. And when the Titans conquer the world, we'll even let you have your own piece of land. And, more importantly, you'll have the respect you deserve. You won't have to hide away behind an illusion because of your parentage. Instead, you will be honored for your strength. How does it sound? Are you insane? Naruto asked in disbelief. Atlas shrugged. We've been keeping an eye on you. And we're impressed by what we see. At Naruto's incredulous look, Atlas sighed. Then at least tell me this, why do you even defend the gods? You can't seriously tell me that the gods have the moral high ground over Titans. Hell, they're even worse than the Titans in some aspects. Naruto froze. Atlas noticed. Exactly, Atlas smiled and spread his arms. Look at the gods. They're pathetic. All they do is cause pain and suffering wherever they go. Countless human lives are lost or destroyed because of their pettiness. Just look at when the Master Bolt was stolen. When Zeus and Poseidon were bickering, their domains reflected their state. Nearly 200 lives were lost in storms. Freak accidents, the media called it. You know what I call it? Murder. Don't pretend like you Titans don't do the same things, Artemis spat. We do, Atlas shrugged. You're right. But at least we're brutally honest about it. We don't hide behind a veneer of goodness and righteousness. And, more importantly, we Titans don't engage in senseless killings like the gods do. If we kill, then we kill with a purpose and only with a purpose. He spread his arms in a grandiose gesture, his voice a deep rumble that reverberated around the ruins as if Naruto was surrounded by speakers. In the world we Titans wish to create, there will never be a mother mourning the loss of her child because Zeus woke up cranky again and blasted some mortals with his lightning bolt. There will never be a brother looking for his sister because Poseidon got into another argument with Athena and decided to drown an entire cruise ship. Naruto's eyes widened. Prosperity. Peace. Atlas continued. That is the world that we wish to create. The gods can literally make food appear out of thin air, but you still see humans starving on the streets. Does that seem right to you? When we conquer the world, humans will get everything they need. Food. Water. Shelter. Naruto paused. And in return, humans will become your slaves and obey your every command with no choice of their own. Atlas smiled coldly. Precisely. I'm glad you understand. A world like that would be perfect. Perfect only for the Titans, Naruto interrupted. A world like that. It would only be a false peace. False prosperity. Humans wouldn't be free, they would be caged, like a bird. Their destinies would be determined by you Titans and not themselves. It may be true that the gods kill humans, ending their hopes and dreams, but if you Titans are in rule, then humans won't even have hopes or dreams. And I cannot, no, I will not accept that. That's true, Atlas admitted. But hey, do you really think humans can be trusted to have their own dreams? Make their own decisions? Just look at them. They waste their lives away with drugs and gambling and their little addictions. Wouldn't it be better if someone capable made their decisions for them? With a good leader, perhaps, Naruto responded. But see, that's the thing. You Titans aren't good leaders, far from it. Quite frankly, despite your words and promises, I don't trust you to make the best decisions for the good of the people. Konoha was similar to the world Atlas described. A village in which the Hokage had control over everything. Unlike America, there was no democracy. There was no voting. There was no council of elected civilians. The Hokage's word was absolute law, and the only way to disobey the Hokage without any fear of punishment was to either be a high-ranking shinobi with lots of influence and power that the village simply could not afford to piss off unless they wanted their lives to suddenly become a massive pain, as was the case with Kakashi-sensei, or they could be the village Jinchuriki and son of the previous Hokage, as was the case with Naruto. However, the system worked perfectly because everything the Hokage did was for the good of the village. The Hokage was the leader, the one that everyone acknowledged. They lived for the village and they died for the village. They willingly gave up their lives to protect the people of Konoha. The Hokage was the living embodiment of the will of the fire. And that was why Naruto didn't believe in Atlas's pretty words and promises. Because no Titan would act like the Hokage. The Titans were selfish and self-serving. Everything they did was for their own pleasures and happiness. If the Titans made the decision for the humans, the decisions wouldn't be for the good of the humans, or the good of the world. It would be for the good of the Titans. Atlas sighed. The gods have tainted your view of us, I see. Naruto stared. Hestia told me about you guys, and she's about as fair and unbiased as you can get. If she thought you guys were terrible people, then you guys were terrible people. Besides, didn't Cronus used to fast-forward the lives of humans with his time powers so he could see them wither up and die? A moment of silence. Damn it, Cronus. Atlas snapped. I told you that your actions would harm our PR image. It would be fine, you said. There's no way we would be affected by it, you said. He sighed dramatically. All right, fine. So Maibai glossed over a few details. But come on. Even though I may have fabricated and whitewashed some things, the world would still be better than it is now. Naruto chuckled. Don't make me laugh. A world where nobody could have dreams. A world where everyone's destiny is determined for them by the Titans. That's a world I'll do everything in my power to prevent from coming true. They had a brief stare down, determined silver eyes against cold gray eyes. Then Atlas sighed. At least I tried. Oh, and one more thing, Naruto began, his silver eyes suddenly filled with determination. You're wrong in that I'm defending the gods. Atlas raised his eyebrows in interest. The actions of the gods. I won't deny that they make terrible choices sometimes, and I won't make any excuses for them. Next to him, Artemis looked away as Atlas smirked. But that doesn't matter right now, Naruto continued. For you see, I care about my family. Hestia. Apollo. Artemis. And it's when you hurt the people that are precious to me that I'll have to completely and utterly destroy you. Naruto's voice wasn't as deep as Atlas's, but somehow it still carried the same weight and power, the determination and resolve of a shinobi that has lost too much and isn't willing to lose any more. Atlas chuckled. You'll completely and utterly destroy me? Don't make me laugh. I was affected for a total of 8 seconds by your strongest attack. It only took me 8 seconds to heal everything up. Granted, it was a painful 8 seconds, but hold up the sky for a couple thousand years and pain isn't really an issue anymore. Naruto tilted his head. Who said that was my strongest attack? Atlas's eyes gleamed with amusement and interest. Oh? Then show me, Naruto, son of Artemis. Try your best to defeat me. And when you finally collapse on the ground battered and broken, if you managed to give me enough entertainment, I may be merciful enough to grant you a painless death. Naruto held up his fingers in a familiar cross-shaped seal. My name is Naruto. You hurt my mother. Prepare to die. Apollo would be so proud of that reference. An army of shadow clones popped into existence and charged Atlas head-on. Naruto wanted to gauge Atlas's strength and abilities. Atlas immediately leaped back to gain distance, his eyes flickering around. Then he shrugged and flicked his hand, releasing an incredible wave of energy. Immediately, all the shadow clones were blown back by the unseen force before dispelling in midair, releasing puffs of chakra smoke. Did you just Shinra Tensei my clones? Naruto asked incredulously. Atlas frowned. Shinra what now? Ah, never mind. That's annoying. Atlas had an ability similar to the almighty push that the Deva Path of Pain used. Naruto hoped that there was a time or usage limit to it, though he honestly doubted it. Titans weren't constrained by silly stuff like chakra or stamina, especially not Atlas. Shuriken Kagebunshin no Jutsu. Atlas didn't even bother dodging the hundreds of kunais streaking his way. They slammed into him and had as much effect as pebbles on a tank. Atlas smirked. Please. I am the Titan of endurance and strength. Try a little harder. Give me some challenge. Naruto narrowed his eyes. Not only was Atlas a Titan, which already meant that his durability and resilience was several thousand times greater than a normal human's, but his domains of endurance and strength meant that Atlas was an impenetrable fortress of muscle and skill. The resilience and durability on par of Juabi Madara and a regeneration that may actually be greater. He wasn't fighting some lowly monster like the Nemean lion or the Manticore. This was the real deal. The Titan of strength and endurance. The second strongest Titan, Cronus's right-hand man. The bearer of the heavens. Atlas. For the first time since the battle with Kaguya, Naruto had to fight for real. He stood absolutely still for a second before vanishing in a blur of speed. And across from him, Atlas smiled. About 20 meters away, safe inside their temporary hideout, Prometheus sighed disappointedly, staring at the holographic images. It didn't work. They decided to fight. Shall I go out and help? Luke Castellan asked. He had his sword, Backbiter, half celestial bronze, half steel, already out. Its razor edge glinted menacingly, as if it was thirsty for blood, and considering how the blade had a small degree of sentience, it probably was. An angry scar ran down his face, but it was nothing compared to the numerous scars on Prometheus. Prometheus shook his head. No. You would only get in the general's way. He gritted his teeth, his hands unconsciously rubbing at old scars. I still don't understand though. How in the world did Naruto manage to get up to the mountain? It should have been impossible for him to enter the Garden of the Hesperides and reach the summit at this time. Luke shrugged, sheathing his sword. A god helped him, probably. We already knew that the second we involved Artemis, numerous gods would do everything they could to circumvent or even outright ignore the ancient laws. Besides, lifting the mist temporarily to allow Naruto to enter probably wasn't even that big of a deal. It's technically not even direct interference. I know. I should have expected it. But I thought that Zeus's authority would be enough to keep them in check. That incompetent idiot. On the bright side, however, Luke continued, at least we'll be able to eliminate Naruto. He came here all alone. Prometheus straightened his silk tie. Of course. He chuckled. I admit, I had thought that Naruto would be more intelligent than that. Rushing in solo? What a fool. Luke smiled. Fortunately for us. Prometheus sighed. But it's such a waste. I had hoped to recruit Naruto to our side. His chakra would have made an amazing addition to the Titan army. You saw how strong he was. Sadly, our normal methods of persuading demigods to join our side, amply their resentment and hate and promise them revenge against their parents, wouldn't have worked with him. I had to try to use the peaceful utopia/terrible gods narrative, but he wasn't convinced. Luke shrugged. To be honest, I doubt any method would have worked in turning Naruto. His eyes flashed angrily. Naruto lived with the gods. Unlike normal demigods, he has no reason to hold resentment whatsoever towards the gods. According to our spy at Camp Half-Blood, he only knew 3 beings in his entire life before coming to camp: Apollo, Artemis, and Hestia. After living with them, do you honestly think you can persuade him to join us? Prometheus hummed thoughtfully. You never know, Luke. You never know. If Naruto survives this, or rather, if Atlas spares Naruto, then I think I'll take another shot. A smile spread across his face. A challenge. Haven't had one of those in a while. Whatever, Luke stood up and began walking away. I'll go check on Annabeth. Have fun with your girlfriend, Prometheus called, turning back to continue watching the fight. Luke ignored him as he had all the times before. In retrospect, this may not have been the best idea. But it was too late to turn back now. Nico trailed behind them, sticking to the shadows and trying desperately to not make a single sound. Hecate and Pan had fallen into a silence. Nico honestly had no idea what he should do. What could he do? There was no way he could win in a fight against 2 gods. He was weak and useless, and if they saw him, then he would surely die. Bad thoughts. It appeared that the after effects of Pan's roar still hadn't faded yet. We're almost there, Hecate suddenly announced. Once we pass the camp borders, we can teleport them out of here. Pan bleated. Finally. Oh no. Nico didn't have much time left. What should he do? He could try to break the illusion over the hunters, but he didn't know how to. Think, what can he do? Nico had no ranged weapons, no projectiles, no explosives. All he had was a stupid knife and some pretty cool armor. That, and his acting skills from role-playing mythomagic battle scenes. Slowly but surely, a plan formed in his mind. Not a good one. Definitely not a good one. But at least he had one. Naruto dodged the spear swipe effortlessly, leaping over it and punching Atlas. Atlas simply leaned out of the way, Naruto's fist sailing harmlessly past him, and then his head was knocked to the side by an invisible force. What? Atlas touched his face in bewilderment. A mistake, it turned out, because the moment he dropped his guard, Naruto capitalized on the opening and rushed forward and delivered an open-handed strike to Atlas's chest. Frog strike. A flash of silver light was released at the point of impact as ripples of natural energy emanated into Atlas's body. If performed on a normal human, their hearts would have literally exploded from the shockwave. Atlas merely grunted before stomping the ground, sending tremors through the earth. Naruto briefly lost his balance and was forced to disengage, leaping away before Atlas could counter-attack. Kid, you mind explaining exactly how your blows contain Artemis's divine energy in them? Atlas rubbed his chest. Would you mind explaining how my attacks have no effect on you? Naruto responded dryly. I already told you. Atlas rested his spear on his shoulder like how a fisherman would rest his fishing pole. I am the Titan of Endurance. No matter what attack you use or what trick you employ, I shall endure it until my dying breath. Atlas paused. Oh wait, guess what? He smiled. Titans don't die. Naruto narrowed his eyes, bringing his hand together in a cross-shaped seal. Time to test a hypothesis. Kage Bunshin no Jutsu. Atlas eyed the clones with amusement. This again. He waved his hand once more and the clones were all blasted back, dispelling with a puff of smoke. Kage Bunshin no Jutsu. Once more, Atlas raised his eyebrows before blasting the clones again. Kage Bunshin no Jutsu. Atlas sighed. This is getting tedious. What are you doing this for? He asked as he waved his hand yet again. Atlas's AoE blasting attack had no delay. And, judging by Atlas's unconcerned gaze, there probably wasn't a usage limit. Atlas didn't have to wait before using it again and he didn't have a limit as to how much he could use. It was an attack similar to the Shinra Tensei, Although nowhere near the level of power, however, it had none of the drawbacks. "I'm just checking something out," Naruto answered. "Really? To me it looks like you're just doing the same thing over and over again, hoping for success but failing every time," Atlas smiled smugly. "So, surrender." Naruto's reply came in the form of throwing a kunai at Atlas. Atlas rolled his eyes, not even bothering to move, just as Naruto had hoped. Naruto substituted with the kunai, appearing in front of Atlas. Atlas's eyes widened in shock as he reacted with an inhuman speed, slamming down his spear, but Naruto sidestepped diagonally and unleashed an uppercut to Atlas's jaw. Atlas's head snapped back from the impact as shadow clones formed around him. Naruto kicked Atlas in the chest while two clones kicked Atlas's legs in the other direction, causing Atlas to lose balance and fall to the ground. Another clone flipped in the air before slamming down its foot in an axe kick straight to Atlas's head while Naruto leaped back, a Rasen Shuriken forming in his hand. After 3 years, Naruto had finally improved to the point where he could form both the Rasengan and the Rasen Shuriken without the assistance of clones. For some reason, his chakra control was exponentially better in this body, perhaps it was because he was literally half chakra. Naruto tossed the Rasen Shuriken down at Atlas, jumping back to avoid the explosion. He didn't want to be caught up in the wind vortex. Even before his feet touched the ground, Naruto's clones surrounded him once more, helping in the shape manipulation. His chakra control wasn't good enough to create this Rasengan variation alone yet. When the wind died down, Naruto could see multiple deep wounds on Atlas's chest, although they were already starting to heal up. Fortunately, Atlas appeared to be temporarily stunned, so Naruto jumped up in the air once more to gain some extra momentum. Planetary Rasengan. 3 normal Rasengans revolving around a big ball Rasengan the size of Naruto's body formed in Naruto's hand. The planetary Rasengan functioned in that the outer Rasengans rotated in different directions than the big ball Rasengan, resulting in a powerful vortex that literally drills through enemies. Naruto slammed the planetary Rasengan down on Atlas's prone body. A whirlwind formed at the point of impact as Naruto was blown back by the explosion, landing lightly on his feet. He distinctly recalled the Edo Tensei reanimations taking longer than usual to regenerate from the planetary Rasengan. Hopefully this would be the case here. Boring, Atlas stood up, his skin steaming from the immense friction generated by the spinning Rasengans. Ichor dripped freely from several cuts on his body, but they were already healing. His cold eyes were filled with annoyance and a bit of disappointment. "You're boring." "Excuse me?" Naruto asked incredulously. "You're the one who's boring. All of my attacks are awesome and new and original. Meanwhile, you're literally just standing there because your broken Titan powers means that both your regeneration and your durability are off the charts." Naruto was well aware of the irony of the situation. Atlas sighed. "I had hoped that after several thousand years, my first fight would be a good one. Sadly, it appears my wishes are going to go unanswered. I'll take care of you now." And then Atlas went on to the offensive and charged. "We're here." Zoe finally stepped on the brakes. The others breathed sighs of relief and got out, looking around them. They were in an empty clearing on the mountainside. Sheets of fog and mist surrounded them, slightly obscuring their vision. "All right, it appears that Naruto may have already entered the garden somehow. Thalia, could you please ask Zeus to let us into the garden?" "He won't answer," Thalia responded immediately, a hint of bitterness appearing in her voice. "He never answers." Zoe sighed. "Just try, please." Thalia didn't look too happy about it, but she closed her eyes. "Hey, Dad? If you could let us into the garden, that would be great. I gotta save my half-sister and all." Thumper rumbled overhead as she opened her eyes. "Did it work, dragon?" Standing in front of them was a 100-headed dragon. It leered at them. Its breath was disgusting, even worse than Nereus. And if Naruto hadn't met Nagato's summons or Apollo in a bikini before, long story, don't ask, it would have easily been one of the scariest creatures he had ever seen. Everything about the dragon seemed to be almost designed to invoke as much fear as possible. "Easy, now," Zoe murmured. "No sudden movements." Percy edged back slowly. "Guys? Why is the weather all weird?" Above, The cloudy skies were replaced by a storm. Dense gray clouds swirled continuously around the peak of the mountain like a hurricane. "That's the sky," Thalia answered. "Literally." "You again," a voice called out. They whirled around to see 4 girls shimmer into existence. They all greatly resembled Zoe. Naruto blanched. "Wait, could it be sisters?" Zoe greeted. "They were family?" Huh. Naruto didn't recall there being a 5th Hesperid. "We do not see any sister," one of the girls responded coldly. "We only see 3 half-bloods, a hunter, and..." She paused and turned to Naruto. "What are you again?" Naruto shrugged. "Demigod, technically. He was half-god." "As for Kurama, was he a monster? A nature spirit? Whatever. It was useless to try to classify Kurama as something within this world." She shrugged. "Very well. It doesn't matter, really. After all, you all will die soon. I presume you asked one of the Olympians for assistance in entering the garden." Percy nodded. "Yeah," Zeus answered Thalia's prayer. He grinned at Thalia. "See? I told you he wasn't completely useless." He paused, his face becoming serious. "Wait. What did you mean by you all will die soon?" The girl tilted her head. "I speak only the truth." "Then we must have very different definitions of the word truth." Percy narrowed his eyes. "Unless that was a threat." "We mean you no harm, Percy Jackson," another girl stepped up. "However, he does. None of you can hope to defeat him." The mountain trembled under their feet as a massive explosion at the summit released a shockwave of pure force and wind that caused their clothes to billow out, even from all the way down here. The girls shifted uneasily and 2 of them cast glances upward, a hint of worry on their beautiful features. "None of us can hope to defeat him, huh?" Percy smirked. "Well, judging by the explosion above, it certainly seems like someone is trying." "Let's go," Zoe commanded. "Lawton will devour you all alive," the girl warned. Zoe raised her eyebrows. "Lawton!" she shouted. Lawton swiveled its heads towards her. "Whoa! What happened to not provoking the big, scary dragon?" Percy whispered in alarm. Zoe smiled, stepping forward. "Sisters, I may not have stepped foot in this garden for thousands of years, but I do remember one thing." She reached out her hand and 2 of Lawton's heads leaned forward and nuzzled it. "The gods don't pay overtime. Right now, Lawton isn't a killing machine guarding Hera's tree. He's just someone who really enjoys head pats." Percy stared. "Cerberus," he breathed. "Go," Zoe called to them, patting Lawton on the head. "Follow the trail." They nodded before rushing past the Hesperides who made no move to stop them. "You realize this is suicide, correct?" The girl addressed Zoe with a cold stare. "I thought I was already dead to you." Zoe cast a glance at her, her expression undecipherable. "Why do you care?" The girl inclined her head. "Fair enough. Goodbye." "Zoe." Strength. Complete overwhelming strength. Atlas's every attack was filled with brute power, inhuman in nature. Cracks formed on the ground from his footwork as columns and black marble was obliterated under the sheer force of his every blow. Blows that missed, of course. There was a reason why most shinobi didn't use spears. Quite simply, they were too slow and predictable. There was a large period of time in which someone could react to a swing or a thrust due to the size of the weapon. A spear had to travel a much longer distance than a kunai. Naruto's speed and precognitive senses allowed him narrowly avoid each and every one of Atlas's strikes. Naruto's eyes widened before he quickly sidestepped a spear thrust. Atlas immediately swung the spear sideways, attempting to crush Naruto's head, but Naruto leaped over it, kicking off the shaft and launching himself into the air and spinning around to deliver a powerful kick to Atlas's face. No effect. Even with the Senjutsu chakra enhancing his muscles and bones, Atlas grinned savagely before continuing with his onslaught. Shadow clones, Rasengan variations, kunai. Nothing worked. Atlas didn't even try to dodge anything, not that he would have been fast enough. Most of the damage was mitigated entirely and the rest was all healed up. Naruto finally understood why Atlas was considered the second strongest Titan. Nothing could keep Atlas down. An unstoppable force that could tank everything that hit him and more. He had no speed or finesse, but that didn't matter because of his overwhelming strength. The force of Atlas's blows literally generated a small whirlwind around him due to the immense pressure. If even a single one of his powerful attacks hit Naruto, then Naruto would surely, well, not die, but at least be incapacitated briefly. Should he use Six Paths Sage Mode? Naruto had hoped to save it for the last resort. Did this count as the last resort? No. Atlas was strong, but Naruto didn't exactly fear for his life or anything. Besides, there was a small chance that Atlas may counter his Six Paths Sage Mode by entering his divine form. Naruto honestly didn't know if he would be able to survive the divine form. He had never tested it before simply because he could not take the risk. Kurama wasn't divine. Until he knew what Kurama was categorized as, he had to continue to stay vigilant. He should just keep on fighting Atlas in Sage Mode. Stall until backup arrives. He had things under control. There wasn't a need to use Six Paths Sage Mode. Yet. Kage Bunshin no Jutsu. Clones swarmed Atlas once more, who didn't even bother waving his hand and instead let out a roar. The clones all dispelled once more as Atlas continued charging Naruto. The ground shook and rocks and boulders and broken columns were crushed into dust as Atlas missed all of his attacks. Thank the gods Atlas was using a spear. Naruto had plenty of time to react and dodge the strikes. Atlas may not realize it, but the only reason why Naruto still had the upper hand, in not getting hit, at least, was because Atlas used the spear and not something more sensible. It was too easy, really. Atlas had the strength and the durability, but his speed was extremely lacking. Still though, what could Naruto do? Atlas was a taijutsu specialist, no doubt about it. He appeared to only have a single ninjutsu attack, a wave of energy he releases that's strong enough to dispel clones. By this logic, Naruto should stop close-range combat and engage in long-range, but the thing was that none of his long-range attacks would work. Kunai, Shuriken, Rasen Shuriken, arrows. They were all useless. They simply lacked the force and power to take Atlas out. Against a normal Titan, Naruto would have surely won by now. But Atlas was too durable and resistant. Celestial bronze, silver, chakra, even rocks Naruto found on the ground had no effect. The Titan of endurance indeed. Naruto regretted not expanding his jutsu pool. If he had even a fraction of the knowledge of jutsu that Kakashi-sensei does. But this was no time for regrets. Futon, Rasen Shuriken. 8 seconds. That's how long Naruto had. In that time, he had to unleash as many combination attacks as he could. Atlas futilely tried to block the Rasen Shuriken with his spear. The spear was sliced to ribbons by the blades of wind and Atlas grunted as the vortex once again hit him square in the chest. Not again, he groaned as he was blasted back, new cuts appearing on his body that leaked golden ichor. Now. While Atlas was down and distracted, this was Naruto's chance. He quickly threw down some smoke bombs to obscure Atlas's vision and make sure he wouldn't use the knockoff Shinra Tensei. Tajuya Kage Bunshin no Jutsu. About 20 clones leaped up into the sky. Senpo, Chudama Rasen Ternan. An ultra-big ball Rasengan formed in each of the clones' hands, easily 5 times the size of Naruto's body. Blue with specks of silver. The same attack Naruto had used to defeat Kurama. Was it overkill? Definitely not. After all, Atlas was easily as durable as Kurama. Not as durable, Atlas had actually been cut by the Rasen Shuriken, but he was in the area. The clones formed a line in midair. A vertical line of Naruto clones just waiting their turns to slam their Rasengans into Atlas's face. The first clone slammed its ultra-big ball Rasengan down on Atlas and then dispelled, allowing the second clone to follow up immediately, and then the third clone, and so on. Several clones actually landed and had to jump back up again to get back into line. Finally, the last clone dispelled. A cloud of dust shrouded Atlas from vision. Naruto quickly manipulated some wind chakra to create a gust of wind that blew the dust away. Surprisingly enough, Atlas's clothes were still intact, although it may also just be the mist protecting Atlas's modesty. Atlas's eyes were closed and he lay in a puddle of ichor that was slowly increasing in size. Was he unconscious? Did he finally pass out? Atlas sat up, dispelling all illusions of victory, and rubbed his head. All right kid, I take it back. Fighting you isn't boring at all. He stood up and stretched contentedly. A cruel smile spread across his face. That did wonders for my back, by the way. Released almost all the tension. Thank you for that. This is ridiculous. Naruto suddenly snapped frustratedly. How are you still standing after all of that? Atlas laughed. I'm not some minor god, kid. I once took Zeus's beloved lightning bolt to the face and came out nearly unscathed. He paused. My eyebrows were singed off though. But I digress. I'm on a whole different level than the dogs you've fought before. Naruto. Naruto whirled around. In his haste, he hadn't noticed that he ended up right next to Artemis again. Her eyes were filled with shock, surprise, and even pride. You've grown strong, she smiled. Naruto brightened as a smile spread on his face. Of course I am. But not strong enough, Artemis said, her expression growing disheartened. Please, Naruto, just run. You can't possibly hope to defeat Atlas all by yourself. I already told you. Naruto, please, Artemis whispered desperately. I don't want to see you hurt because of me. Across from him, Atlas observed them with mild amusement, although he probably also needed time to regenerate. Naruto was silent for a moment before shaking his head. Mom, you should know me well enough to know that I never give up. Naruto flashed her a bright smile. I'll be fine. He froze. What was that sound? What sound? Artemis asked confusedly. Are you talking about your friends hurrying up the mountain? Atlas suggested, they're not even being remotely subtle, like you had been. Speaking of which, how did you avoid the security measure on the path? I didn't take the path, Naruto replied absently. I tree jumped up here. But that's not the sound I'm talking about. It was. He frowned. A yawn. Atlas stared. Are you okay, mentally? Naruto opened his mouth to respond but froze when a familiar voice spoke up in his mind. Hey, Naruto. I'm awake. What did I miss? A wide smile spread across Naruto's face, filled with genuine joy and happiness. Kurama. As they ran up the mountain, they heard multiple explosions. Whatever boss was doing, he was doing a pretty good job. So what's the plan? Percy uncapped his pen and it extended into a sword. We cannot defeat him, Zoe said grimly. The clone blinked. I'm pretty sure that boss can. What do you know about Titan physiology? Zoe interrupted. If you cut them into tiny enough pieces, they return to Tartarus, Naruto answered. Wrong, Zoe shook her head. That's a common misconception. No, the truth is that when we say someone killed a god, we mean that they were sent to Tartarus. Tartarus is synonymous with a god's death. And a god can only be sent to Tartarus by opening up a physical gateway. They're not like monsters, whose physical forms disintegrate and their essence automatically returns to Tartarus. Wasn't Cronus sliced into a million pieces though? Bianca asked. Zoe nodded. He was. Zeus used Cronus's own scythe to carve up his essence. However, that wasn't what sent him to Tartarus. Rather, the gods physically scattered his remains into the pit. Same with the other four titans, Koios, Crius, Hyperion, and Iapetus. They were bound in chains and tossed into the deepest sections of Tartarus. Naruto shrugged. Okay. That changes nothing. After all, we're not trying to kill him, are we? We're just trying to get him back under the sky. Zoe smiled. Precisely. When you attack him, don't go for the vital spots like you normally would. Instead, target his arms and legs, try to reduce his mobility. Of course, he would likely regenerate it all. The general's regeneration is notorious even among titans, but it should slow him down temporarily, long enough for us to get a combination chain attack in. That's what boss is doing right now, Naruto confirmed. He's trying to get Atlas back under the sky. Good. The clone blinked as a thought occurred to him and then he promptly face-palmed. Please. Boss, tell me you're not this stupid. Bianca looked over. What is it? It's nothing. There was a very high probability that instead of trying to bait Atlas under the sky again with trickery and cunning, Boss instead opted to try to beat the living hell out of Atlas before dragging him under the sky, a task infinitely more difficult. But there's no way. Naruto was probably just having trouble because Atlas had millennia of battle experience and he's a titan, so he would see through tricks and deception. Right? It's been so long. Naruto smiled. I'm really glad you're awake. I need your help in beating the living hell out of Atlas. Are you in a battle? Inside his mind, Kurama smirked as he took in the situation. You certainly don't waste any time, do you? Have you already made enemies in this world? Yup. See that guy over there? He's almost as durable as you. He tanked my Raisin Shuriken and healed it all up in about 8 seconds. So if you could hit me up with some chakra, that would be awesome. Kurama blinked before chuckling. I've only been awake for 10 seconds and you already need my help in fighting someone who was hit by your Raisin Shuriken and didn't appear to take a scratch. You haven't changed at all, he said fondly. Fine, fill me in. Who are we fighting? His name is Atlas. He's not mortal. He tanked my Rasengan, Raisin Shuriken, Planetary Rasengan, Senpo, Chudama Raisin Ternan, and a lot of kunais. They barely did any damage to him, and the damage that he did take was all healed up. Oh? Naruto nodded. Yup. If I didn't know any better, I would swear that he knew mitotic regeneration, or something. At any rate, he's slow but strong, not that strong though. Bushier Brows Sensei with a few gates released is stronger than him. He has an attack similar to the Shinra Tensei, although it's much weaker than what Nagato can do. Got it, Kurama hummed. What about the girl behind us? I recognize her, she was the girl from that night. Her name is Artemis. And? She's my mom. Kurama was silent for a moment. I'm happy for you, he finally said. His voice held traces of both regret and guilt. Naruto paused. You know I don't blame you for killing my original parents, right? Yeah. I know. Kurama quickly changed the subject. What is she holding up? It. I have no idea what it is. The sky. The what? It's complicated, I'll explain later. All we have to do is to completely annihilate that guy and then drag him under the sky. Kurama grinned. Sounds fun. Let's do it. Naruto smiled. It's great to have you back. I owe you a hug, by the way. Please don't. Does he do this often? Atlas gestured at Naruto, frowning. Completely space out and ignore everything. Don't speak to me, you vile bastard, Artemis spat. Now see, that is irony, Atlas grinned. My parents were married, but you weren't. So who's the bastard here? Still though, I gotta thank you for spacing out, he addressed Naruto. Gave me enough time to completely regenerate all of my broken bones and heal up my internal injuries. Mom. Naruto spoke up, ignoring Atlas. Yes. She responded. You're right in that I can't defeat Atlas on my own. Naruto took a step forward. Another step. But that's the thing. He smiled, flames of determination roaring to life within him. Some might call it the will of fire. For Naruto, he just called it the guts to never give up. For you see, I'm not alone. Flickering golden chakra quickly covered his entire body as black markings extended out. His golden and black chakra cloak billowed out as the sheer power radiated from the chakra blasted rubble and dust back. His eyes shifted into a cross-shaped pupil as Naruto felt a familiar, comforting chakra once more ready to heed his every call. Meet Kurama, my partner, Naruto grinned. He tilted his head as he sensed people approaching. Oh, and say hello to my friends as well. Percy, Zoe, Bianca, Thalia, and his shadow clone appeared, determination and anger etched onto their faces. The shadow clone took one look at the situation and for some strange reason face-palmed before dispelling. Naruto raised his eyebrows as the clone's memories hit him. An explanation on space-time. Zoe is a terrifying driver. Titan physiology. Naruto's eyes widened. Wait. He should have been trying to get Atlas back under the sky, but instead, he was more focused on making sure Atlas got what he deserved for what he did to Artemis, namely, beating the living hell out of him. Oops. But oh well. He already entered Kurama Chakra mode. Might as well, you know? Atlas merely smiled coldly at the sight of them all. Ah, you've all come as well. The son of Poseidon, the daughter of Zeus, some random hunter. And my daughter. Percy frowned. Daughter? Who are you? He trailed off and slowly turned to face Zoe. Hold up. Naruto's eyes widened as he compared the two. Zoe and Atlas had the same cold, regal gaze, although Zoe's was several degrees warmer. Their facial features were also scarily similar. Huh. Zoe was Atlas's daughter. Zoe narrowed her eyes. You are no father of mine. Naruto suddenly got a very Uchiha vibe from the situation. And he didn't like that at all. Still though, even as Atlas and Zoe exchanged insults, he felt a warm sensation in his heart. And at that moment, he knew that he had made a mistake. He had tried to do it all alone. Defeat Atlas on his own. But that was wrong. Hadn't Itachi already told him to not shoulder everything by himself or else he would fail? That his comrades would help him succeed? And now, surrounded by his friends and comrades. It's been a long time. Too long. But right now, it sort of feels like being back with Team 7 again. Especially with Kurama finally being back. Come on, Naruto. Let's do this, Kurama smiled determinedly. Naruto grinned, golden chakra arms extending from his chakra cloak. It was time Atlas truly understood just who he was fighting. The savior of the shinobi world. Kurama's partner. The son of Artemis. Naruto Uzumaki was back. Let's go, Kurama. Chapter 10, Unexpected Outcomes. 3 children of the Big Three. The lieutenant of the Hunters of Artemis. And Naruto in both Sage Mode and Kurama Chakra Mode. Atlas didn't stand a chance. Before Atlas could continue monologuing, Naruto attacked. Sure, it may have been bad form to strike while Atlas was still talking, but at this point, Naruto didn't really care. He crossed the distance in less time than it took to blink with a speed comparable to the Hiraishin. Not quite as fast, but nearly. With Kurama's chakra enhancing his physical capabilities, Naruto unleashed a flurry of combination attacks. His movements flowed smoothly but slammed into Atlas with a formidable force that should have cracked bones on a normal human but instead only bruised skin. His golden chakra arms were a blur around Naruto as they constantly weaved in Rasengans and even mini-Rasen shurikens. Of course, the attacks Naruto landed didn't matter because Atlas healed as fast as Naruto could deal out the damage. Naruto gritted his teeth at the unfairness of the situation. Not only did Atlas take reduced damage due to both his Titan physiology as well as his domain of endurance, he also regenerated at a ridiculous rate. Percy and Thalia quickly joined him. Not in close quarters combat, of course, Naruto was likely nothing more than a blur of movement to the two, and getting in between the son of Artemis and the general was suicide. Rather, Thalia assisted by calling down blasts of lightning and sending out arcs of electricity from his spear. Percy, on the other hand, was manipulating water to bombard Atlas's face repeatedly. It didn't damage him, but it certainly distracted and caused him to lose focus. Atlas staggered back, trying to block as many of the blows as possible, but it was futile. His spear had already been shredded by the Rasen Shuriken and he had resorted to using his elbows, hands, and knees to block and deflect, although his body was infinitely more durable than the spear. We don't need their help, Kurama commented. They're just getting in your way. It's fine. I kinda enjoy this. Besides, I promised to let them have some of the fun too. Fighting alongside them filled Naruto with a warm feeling of nostalgia and happiness. He had forgotten just how good teamwork felt, the satisfaction of a combination attack gone well and the elation of completely overwhelming the enemy with superior tactics. Behind them, Zoe and Bianca knelt by Artemis. Clearly, they were unable to get a clear shot at Atlas due to Naruto constantly moving around and instead decided to check up on their mistress. Milady, Zoe pleaded to Artemis, please, let me take thy burden. Artemis shook her head and smiled weakly. Don't worry about me. The weight of the sky is not yours to bear. Naruto had almost forgotten about Artemis. Damn it, what kind of son was he? He needed to end this. Now. Naruto blurred above Atlas and slammed an ultra-big ball Rasengan down on Atlas, stunning him temporarily. Percy and Thalia jumped back, avoiding the explosion and shrapnel. Naruto's golden chakra arms enlarged and grabbed Atlas's prone body before launching him over to where Artemis knelt. Now! Naruto yelled. Artemis nodded and prepared to roll out of the way so that Atlas would be trapped under the sky once more. Zoe let loose a couple more arrows at Atlas's flying body and Bianca quickly stepped back to get out of the way. With an inhuman strength, Atlas spun around in midair and landed on his feet, skidding on the ground and coming to a stop just a few feet away from Zoe and Bianca. Oops. Naruto hadn't expected Atlas to recover so quickly. Zoe abandoned her bow immediately, clearly understanding that arrows won't do anything against the general's tough skin especially at close range, and instead drew her celestial bronze sword out of nowhere. Hey Kurama, lend me a hand. Shouldn't you be worried that you knocked Atlas right next to them? Nah. They're strong. Atlas seemed amused by her actions. Even as his wounds healed, he towered above Zoe with a smirk. My dear daughter, are you really going to try to cut me down? His eyes widened as he quickly snatched an arrow out of the air. His head whipped around to stare at Bianca. Did you just shoot me as I was talking? Bianca raised her eyebrows, showing some bravado for the first time on the quest. You know, they didn't exactly cover combat etiquette yet. Besides, last I checked, you're fighting against kids. No, not just that, you're losing against kids. Zoe, remind me to tell Nico to toss out his Atlas Mythomagic card. Holy hell, did Bianca just say that to Atlas? Thalia, Percy, and Naruto shared identical grins of pride. It appeared that Bianca finally gained some confidence and learned the art of banter and trash-talking opponents. Sure, it wasn't perfect and there was room for improvement in the tone and inflection, but for a beginner's attempt, it was pretty good. You filthy hunter! Atlas snarled in rage as he raised his fist holding the arrow, then he froze. Wait. He slowly turned his head to look at the arrow, scrutinizing it. This is Stygian iron. There was a moment of silence at that. Then Atlas began laughing. Oh, this is beautiful. So little corpse breath also had a kid. He paused. No, kids. You have a brother. He let out a few chuckles. So I'm against children of all the big three, huh? Behind Zoe and Bianca, Artemis narrowed her eyes at the revelation. Is the chakra balanced? Yup. It's ready. Damn, that took way too long. I've gotten rusty. Don't worry, so have I. We'll have to train a lot after this to get back to our former level of strength. A miniature Bijudama formed in one of Naruto's chakra hand with Kurama's help. By himself, Naruto could only create the super mini Bijudama, but with Kurama's aid, they could form a Bijudama the size of a regular Rasengan. An ultra-condensed sphere of chakra with the perfect ratio of black positive chakra to white negative chakra. Not even Atlas should be able to get up from this anytime soon, plenty of time to drag him back under the sky. Time to end this. Shadow clones formed and quickly stood in front of Artemis, Zoe, and Bianca. Ah, are you protecting your little family? Atlas said mockingly, a taunting smile on his face. It's cute, really, it is. At that, a hint of confusion entered Zoe's eyes. Actually, I am, Naruto nodded. A wall of golden chakra exploded out from the clones, shielding the goddess and demigods from damage. Not from you though. The smile on Atlas's face faltered as Naruto's chakra arm blurred forward, crossing the distance almost instantaneously. Atlas reacted impossibly quickly, bringing his elbow up to block the scaled-down Bijudama. Oh look, he said dryly. It changed colors. Now it's purple. He was cut off when the extraordinarily dense sphere of chakra overcame the resistance and broke his elbow. He immediately let out a roar of pain, twisting his body to try to dodge the Bijudama but failing. Naruto slammed the tailed beast bomb into Atlas's chest, cracking several ribs. Then Naruto quickly drew back his chakra arm and the Bijudama exploded. The golden chakra contained the destructive explosion, shielding everyone from the force. But even then, they all skidded back several inches from the sheer magnitude of the shockwaves. Game over. What do you mean by that? Game over. What, did you become a shogi master when I was asleep? Naruto's eyes widened in realization. Remind me to introduce you to the awesomeness that is video games. Finally, the explosion died down and Atlas collapsed onto the ground, unmoving. Naruto grinned as the shadow clones dispelled. It appeared that the Bijudama worked. Of course it did. I helped in its creation, after all. Exactly. Why do you think I had doubts? No comeback? Seriously? I just woke up, Kurama grumbled. Give me a break. Besides, I don't even need to say anything, the results speak for itself. All of your Rasengan variants? Failed. But my single Bijudama? Success. Zoe wasted no time and immediately stepped forward, grabbing Atlas's arm and effortlessly dragging him with a strength that a girl her size shouldn't have. Atlas groaned weakly, his head flopping side to side as Zoe dropped him down right in front of Artemis. Naruto grinned. They won. Naruto! Kurama shouted in warning as both his negative emotion sensing and intuition exploded, sending warning signals after warning signals. And then everything went to shit. Oh my gods! Nico screamed out in shock. Hecate and Pan whirled around to face him, fierce expressions on their face, clearly expecting a squadron of trained demigods. Instead, they came face to face with a young kid. Pan blinked. Hecate, am I seeing things, or is that a kid there? Hecate was a bit more straightforward. She immediately lifted up her hand and green mist began curling around it. Who are you? She demanded. My name's Nico, Nico responded happily. Are you Hecate? The two shared a glance and they seemed to grow even more suspicious and wary. Yes, Hecate nodded her head. I am Hecate, the goddess of the... That is so cool. Nico interrupted, an excited smile on his face. You deal the most magic damage, and you have complete immunity against magic damage. It's as if your very existence is a bane to magicians everywhere. Now Hecate just looked confused. Magic damage? Magicians? What are you talking about? Mythomagic. Nico answered. The best game in the world, infinitely better than poker. Hecate raised her eyebrows, intrigued. Mythomagic? What is that? Is it a form of magic? Why have I never heard of it before? Nico's eyes widened. You haven't heard of mythomagic before? He breathed in horror. But you're one of the best goddesses. Hecate's lips quirked up. I am. Nico nodded vehemently. I mean, let's face it. Hera just grants her allies bonus stats, Athena does some decent physical damage but Ares does more, Demeter is an intro pack card, and the only reason why anyone would use Aphrodite's card is because her splash art is pretty. But you? Not only do you have the highest magic damage output, but you also have complete immunity against magic damage. Complete immunity. Cards like Circe or Medea are completely nullified and useless against you. Throughout his speech, Hecate seemed to grow more and more pleased with each goddess named. I see. What is your name again? Nico. Nico. How do you feel about joining the Titan Lord? Nico frowned. What? Pan stared at her. Now wait a minute. Why are you trying to recruit him? Hecate sighed. Can't you see he's extremely intelligent? She turned to Nico. Tell me. Do you feel any resentment towards your godly parent for abandoning you? Tears welled up in Nico's eyes. He sniffled. Being able to cry on demand was extremely useful when dealing with teachers who didn't have the patience to comfort a sniveling kid and instead would walk away in disgust, allowing Nico to get away scot-free. He took a few hesitant steps forward, looking down. I didn't want him to leave me. He abandoned us, he said in a voice filled with a faux sadness and hatred. Or maybe it was a her. Nico couldn't remember. Hecate bought it. Don't worry, she said soothingly as she walked forward. I understand completely. Nico, I will promise you this. If you join us, then no child would ever be abandoned by their parents again. There will be no more stupid ancient laws preventing us from interacting with our children. Really? Nico asked hopefully, taking another step forward. Just a few feet left. She closed the distance, placing her hand comfortingly on his shoulder. Really? Nico looked up at her before his eyes widened in horror and fear filled his gaze. Behind you! He screamed. Pan and Hecate whirled around. And Nico struck. He grabbed his concealed knife and stabbed it into Hecate's side. She's a goddess, he told himself. Not a human. A goddess who was about to hurt the hunters. Sure, they suck and all, but they don't deserve to be captured and hurt. She's not going to die from this. Golden ichor splattered out as Hecate screamed in pain and agony, throwing out her hand. Nico was blasted back from an unseen wave of energy, slamming into a tree and groaning in agony. Hecate stared at him with pain and betrayal in her beautiful green eyes. You, she winced as she held her hand to her stomach, trying to staunch the bleeding. Hecate. Pan reached out and steadied her. He turned to look at Nico, anger in his eyes. What do you think you're doing? Nico backed away slowly, holding up his knife threateningly. Golden ichor dripped down the blade. The best way to counter an illusion is to attack the card creating the illusion. Pan frowned. You're speaking nonsense. What do you mean by? He froze as the tip of a bronze sword touched his neck. It means, the hunter said, her gaze murderous, that we were able to break free of the mist. Pan bleated nervously. Hey, we can talk about this. He quickly let out another blast of unholy sound. This time the hunters were prepared for it and its effects were greatly diminished. However, it was still enough to get the hunter to lower her knife and step back in fear, giving Hecate enough time to snap her fingers and enveloping them in green mist. A second later, they were gone, dematerializing out of existence. Nico grinned in exhilaration. It worked. He did it. Honestly, it had been a massive gamble. There was a high chance that his plan would fail. However, Nico wagered that being stabbed would break even a goddess's concentration temporarily, enough time for the hunters, who had thousands of years of experience in everything supernatural, to break through the illusion. Of course, he had to lower Hecate's guard first to get close enough to her, but that's what mythomagic was for. Then all of his euphoria disappeared immediately when the hunters pointed their bows at him, their eyes narrowed. A hunter stepped forward. Phoebe, Nico recognized. She was the one who broke the Stahl twins' bones. Why are you here? She demanded. Nico returned her cold stare with a smug grin of his own. I was looking for you guys. Now then. Shall we discuss terms? She frowned. Excuse me. Nico smirked. Well, it wouldn't look very good for the hunters of Artemis if word got out that they had to be saved by a boy, would it? The hunters exchanged glances, growing looks of worry appearing on their faces. I mean, here you are, super awesome fighters who've trained for thousands of years, but you had to be rescued by a mere 10-year-old boy, Nico continued, his smug expression almost unbearable at this point. But hey, they took Bianca away from him. They deserved this. I wonder how long it would take for your street cred to recover. Decades? Perhaps even centuries. Phoebe stared at Nico with an intense stare that almost made him back off. Almost. Phoebe finally relented and sighed, making a hand signal that caused the other hunters to lower their bows. What do you want? Phoebe asked in resignation. Nico's grin widened. Time for negotiations. First off. The ground under Bianca, Percy, and Thalia's feet dissolved into shadows and they dropped through, Percy and Thalia screaming out various Greek obscenities and Bianca just flat out screaming. The ground solidified immediately after them, returning to normal as if nothing had happened. Zoe whirled around. Bianca! She shouted. Zoe! Artemis shouted at the same time. Atlas! Atlas's form began glowing a bright gray. Zoe leaped away immediately, landing next to Naruto. Close your eyes, she hissed. Actually, no. Get out of here now. What? Naruto protested. He's entering his divine form. Zoe drew his bow and showered arrow after arrow onto Atlas, all of which had no effect. You'll die from being in his presence alone. Please, leave now. But you'll die too. And that is my fate. Zoe's dark eyes were wild. One shall perish by a parent's hand. I joined this quest knowing I would die, but you don't have to. Naruto glanced over and he felt his heart clench at what he saw in Zoe's eyes. Fear. Anger. But also acceptance. She accepted the prophecy. She accepted her fate. And she accepted that she would die by her father's hand. Find and regroup with the others, Zoe continued, backing up slowly as Atlas's form glowed even brighter, gripping her sword tightly. Make sure you... No, Naruto narrowed his eyes. Those who abandon their comrades are worse than trash. We'll defeat Atlas, together. Zoe shook her head. It's pointless. I'm going to die on this quest. There's no changing fate. There is, Naruto asserted determinedly. If you don't like your fate, don't accept it. Change it. And even if you might accept it, I won't, and if I have to, I'll change it for you. Zoe made a sound of frustration. You're still young. You're one of the few good male heroes I've met. You don't need to die now. Don't worry, I won't, Naruto responded simply. That was a lie. He might. But for Zoe's sake, he'll have to try. He wasn't going to let another one of his friends die when he could have prevented it. He won't let another death like Neji's occur. Never again. Naruto, Artemis spoke up for the first time since their argument began, her gaze set and sorrowful. Listen to Zoe. Leave. Uttering those words seemed to physically pain her. Naruto was silent for a moment. Hey, Kurama, how confident are you that we'll be able to survive into an insta-kill disintegrating area of effect attack? I'm gonna need a little more to go on here. How does the attack work? No idea, to be honest. Kurama snorted. Then I can't exactly come up with an answer then, can I? Then let's just hope for the best. I mean, I'm half god, half chakra. Should be fine. You're half what now? Long story, I'll explain later. Sorry, Artemis, Naruto smiled. But I'm staying. I'm not going to give up. I'm not going to run. And I'm most certainly not going to let Zoe die. Naruto grinned at Artemis as Atlas's form became blinding, signifying that he was mere seconds from entering his divine form. I swear it. A massive wave of devastating power exploded out from Atlas as he entered his divine form. He emanated an intense energy that slammed into Naruto with the force of a Bijudama. Naruto felt a sensation on his skin that he couldn't quite describe, as if his very molecules were being scrambled up. Nope. Naruto slammed his eyelids shut immediately. He'll stick to long-range attacks for now. He wasn't risking it. Next to him, Zoe also tensed up. However, even though she was looking straight at Atlas, she wasn't dying. How are you not dead? Naruto asked. My mother is a river goddess, she responded, though her voice was strained. I can withstand Atlas's divine form for some time, but eventually, he will overwhelm me. My divinity is extremely weak. Atlas let out a sigh of satisfaction as he stood up. It's been thousands of years since I've entered my divine form. You have no idea how good this feels. Relying on his other senses, Naruto could tell that Atlas was still a humanoid being. 2 arms, 2 legs, a head. If it wasn't for the tremendous power radiating from his form, Naruto would think Atlas was just a human. Why did it take so long for you to enter your divine form? Naruto asked. If there was a time delay, then Naruto wanted to know for future battles. He had been a shinobi, after all, and shinobi loved information about enemy attacks. Entertainment, Atlas answered simply. The conversation you and my daughter had was amusing, and I was curious if you were going to leave or not. Personally, my money was on you staying, you don't seem like the type of person to leave their friends. Despite himself, Naruto grinned. Thank you. After all, Atlas continued, you are remarkably stupid. Leaving would have been too smart for you. The smile melted off of Naruto's face, replaced with a scowl. Yeah, I was only going to beat you up a bit before, but now, you deserve a complete and utter smackdown. Overconfidence or arrogance? A bluff, actually. Ah, I see. Atlas laughed. Oh, you are truly amusing. You still think you stand a chance? Naruto tilted his head. For sure. As long as I keep my eyes closed and I stay out of your range of death, then I should be fine. Atlas's death aura range appeared to be about 2 meters, that was where the power felt the strongest. You can still run, you know, Zoe muttered, a bead of sweat trickling down. I won't hold it against you. You won't, but I will. Naruto held his hands up in a cross-shaped seal. Let's win this. He paused. By the way, where is Percy, Bianca, and Thalia? He called to Atlas. Atlas shrugged. I can't exactly enter my divine form with those three around, could I? Those three are valuable. I'm not allowed to kill them. Naruto nodded. As such, I just had to wait for my subordinates to manipulate the mist and extract those three from the battlefield before I could fight for real. Othris has an extensive underground tunnel system, you see, Atlas explained. They're down there right now, fighting against some old friends. But enough time for talking, Atlas lowered into a stance. You injured me numerous times already. It's time I returned the favor. Naruto jumped back immediately as Atlas blurred forward. His chakra arms extended and battered Atlas with 3 raisin shurikens, but Atlas simply charged through them. Zoe met him head-on. Atlas punched and Zoe sidestepped before Atlas smirked and elbowed to the side with his extended arm, attempting to crush Zoe's skull. Zoe immediately dropped to the ground in a crouch, spinning while doing so, and redirected her momentum into a horizontal sword slice aimed at the back of Atlas's neck. It was an elegant counter, one that even Sasuke would have approved of. The celestial bronze sword cut into Atlas's neck, and then Zoe was blown back as Atlas simply snapped his fingers, releasing a pulse of energy. Naruto quickly extended a chakra arm to catch Zoe, lowering her to the ground gently. She breathed heavily, exhausted. It appeared that even though both her parents were immortals, fighting Atlas still took its toll on her. Naruto didn't blame her. Atlas's aura affected even him from this far away through Kurama's chakra cloak. Naruto still had that uncomfortable sensation on his skin, and he had no doubt that if he wasn't in Kurama chakra mode, his skin would be steaming by now from the extraordinary energy, and he wasn't even in Atlas's range of death yet. It appeared he had no choice. He breathed in as he prepared to. If it weren't for Atlas right there, Naruto's eyes would have snapped open in surprise. As it was, a sharp intake of breath still escaped him. How is that possible? Damn it. This wasn't good. There was no time to dwell on it though, he'll have to deal with it later. You okay? Naruto asked Zoe in concern, ignoring the confusion and slightest hints of panic suddenly surging through him. She nodded. I'm fine. Atlas strolled forward, completely unconcerned. His posture was relaxed, as if he was taking a walk through the park. Now then. Which shall I kill first? The lieutenant of Artemis? Or the son of Artemis? Zoe's eyes widened. What did you say? Before Naruto could respond, Atlas took advantage of the small distraction and dashed forward. The ground shook under their feet and cracked from the force. Naruto jumped up as Zoe leaped back to avoid Atlas. Naruto began forming another Bijudama. Then he froze. Or more accurately, time around him froze. Naruto couldn't move. He couldn't breathe. What in the name of the sage? Kurama roared in shock as he pumped his chakra through Naruto's body. Cronus. The Titan of Time. Naruto had thought he was too weak to interfere with mortal affairs, but apparently he had gathered enough strength to manipulate the time of a single person. More importantly, it appeared that the Titan Lord had deemed Naruto enough of a threat to personally aid in dispatching him. Damn. Damn. Naruto released a massive pulse of chakra, attempting to dispel the spell like he would dispel a genjutsu. No effect. It was like when Kaguya pulled him into the gravity dimension, only Atlas and Zoe didn't seem to be affected at all. He was completely isolated. Atlas materialized in front of him with a burst of speed, reaching out and forcibly prying open Naruto's eyelids, as if wanting to see the life fade from Naruto's eyes. And Naruto came face to face with divinity itself. Percy landed on his feet, wincing from the impact. 1 second he was standing back, watching a one-sided fight in which Naruto utterly destroyed Atlas with a purple ball, and the next second he was falling into a hole that wasn't there a moment before. He looked up, expecting to see a large open space because he had free-falled for about 5 seconds, which is longer than one might expect, but instead he was met with a ceiling just a few meters above his head. It was like the labyrinth all over again. It appeared that going back up wasn't an option anymore. He glanced around. Thalia and Bianca were next to him, thankfully. They stood in a well-lit room, torches lining the wall. There weren't any doors and windows, they were trapped in. The walls were composed of the same black marble material that the ruins were made of. Percy didn't focus on that, however. Instead, his eyes narrowed at the person standing in front of them. Beside him, Thalia's eyes widened in shock and she actually lowered her guard somewhat. "Luke," she whispered. Luke Castellan grinned at them. "Hey there, Thalia." Short, sandy blonde hair. Mischievous blue eyes. A scar that ran from the bottom of his eye down to his chin. Unlike the last time when Percy had seen him when Luke had worn a button-down shirt and khaki pants, fashionable but not very good for combat, Luke went for a more sensible outfit for combat, t-shirt and shorts. "You look terrible," Thalia immediately replied. She was right, Luke's usually tan skin was now ghostly pale and he had multiple gray streaks running through his hair. Luke chuckled. "That's the first thing you say to me after we haven't seen each other for years." He ran his hand through the gray streaks in his hair. "I won't argue though. The sky. It took its toll on me." He smiled. "But you still find me devilishly handsome, don't you?" Percy's jaw dropped. Was Luke flirting with Thalia? Thalia scoffed, her shock slowly turning into anger. "You know, I have quite a lot of questions for you, Luke Castellan." "You're mad at me," Luke observed. Thalia's eyes flashed. "Wow, what made you think that?" "You called me by my full name," Luke noted. "You only do that whenever you're really mad." He paused. "Don't tell me you're mad at me because I betrayed Olympus." Percy had to physically hold Thalia back, grabbing her shoulders and preventing her from charging Luke. "Thalia, he's baiting you." "I am not," Luke looked offended at the very idea. "I don't understand why you would be mad at me, Thalia. Don't you remember all those times we talked? All those times we cursed the gods? The gods only bring misery and suffering upon us," he snarled. "They abandoned us, they betrayed us first." Thalia hesitated before a steely look entered her eyes. "I don't care about that. You didn't just betray Olympus. You betrayed us." She clenched her fist. "Family, Luke. We were a family." Luke flinched slightly. "Sacrifices must be made for the greater good," he finally said. "And I'm sorry. But it doesn't have to be that way. If you join me, it'll be like the old times. The three of us together. Fighting for a better world. Sacrifices." Thalia hissed in rage. "I heard about what you did last summer. Annabeth nearly died because of you. Is that what we are now? Sacrifices." Sparks of electricity leaped from her fingers, and Percy could smell the distinct scent of ozone. Luke realized his mistake. "That's not what I meant, and you know it. Besides, I had faith in Annabeth. She wouldn't have died." He sighed when he saw that his words weren't getting through to Thalia. "Thalia, please. Just join me." He waved his hand and a pond ringed in black marble appeared. "Just call the Ophiuchorus. It will come to you." Thalia blinked, confusion temporarily overtaking anger. "Ignoring the fact that you can now apparently conjure up objects, you realize that the Ophiuchorus is with Poseidon right now, right?" Percy nodded. "Dad is personally guarding him right now." Luke shrugged. "Don't ask me how it works. It's magic. However, just know that the Ophiuchorus will appear if you wish for it." He turned to Thalia with a pleading look. "Thalia, you will be more powerful than the gods if you summon the Ophiuchorus. Just call him, sacrifice him, and then join me. Please. For one scary second, Thalia had that hungry gleam in her eyes again, and Percy genuinely thought that she might accept his offer. Then Bianca stepped forward and rested her hand on Thalia's shoulder. Don't you remember what you promised to do? Bianca murmured. You said you would defeat him in battle, chain him up, inflict massive amounts of pain onto him, and then finally try to convince him to, well, you know. Thalia stirred from her trance. You promised to do what now? Luke asked incredulously, backing up slowly. And you? Bianca turned onto Luke with a fierce glare. I admit, I don't know the full circumstances surrounding you. But I do know that you betrayed your friends and family, and you are undeniably evil. Evil. Luke's face twisted. The gods are evil, Bianca D'Angelo. Have you not seen what they've done? The misery and suffering they've caused? Trust me, right now, they may seem all good and righteous to you. But give it a few years, and you'll truly understand. We're just their tools. Do you think that Hades truly cares about you? Bianca nodded confidently. Yeah. I do. How? He demanded. Wait, let me guess. He gave you a little gift, then he spoke a few words of encouragement. Bianca paused. How do you? Luke laughed bitterly. Because that's exactly what my father did to me, Bianca. Showed up one day when I was, breaking into the camp store, gave me some stupid winged shoes, said that he was proud of me. Then when I failed my quest. Nothing. He did nothing for me. Tossed me out like yesterday's garbage. You're kinda forgetting the fact that Hermes asked me to watch out for you and try to bring you back during the quest to retrieve the golden fleece, Percy said. Luke waved his hand dismissively. Oh please. That means nothing. The point is. Well. Thalia, Percy, Bianca. The children of Zeus, Poseidon, and Hades. Join me, and together, we shall overthrow the gods and bring about a new era of peace and prosperity. A better world. A moment of silence. You aren't Luke, Thalia spoke up, her voice filled with sadness and sorrow. I don't know you anymore. Thalia, Luke pleaded, and for a second his gaze softened and his eyes were impossible gentle. Please. Thalia hesitated. She gazed at Luke, her eyes full of pain, as if the only thing she wanted in the world was to believe him and join him. Then she leveled her spear at him. Percy, Bianca, she spoke in a whisper. Stay out of this. Luke sighed before flicking his hand. His sword, backbiter, half celestial bronze, half steel, capable of killing both the divine and mortals, appeared out of nowhere and Luke lowered into a stance. Before we battle though, I have just one question. What is it? Thalia asked. Why are you guys so early? Percy blinked. That's what you're asking. It's been on my mind for the past hour or so, Luke confessed. I mean. It just seems wrong. The winter solstice isn't until tomorrow. You guys are a whole day early. I mean, are you guys even demigods? Percy opened his mouth to respond but then froze when Thalia began laughing. As in, full-blown laughter. Luke watched her with a small genuine smile that Percy hadn't ever seen on his face before, even before Luke defected and pretended to be Percy's friend. Luke seemed younger, almost. Brighter. Happier. After a while, Thalia's laughter slowly subsided. She regarded Luke with a sad smile. I'm glad to see that at least some things never change. Luke grinned. Of course. For a moment, they just gazed at each other, and Percy got the sense that they weren't really looking at each other but rather remembering happier memories of a time that would never come back. And then Thalia charged. Naruto smiled widely when absolutely nothing happened. His gamble paid off. Atlas's divine form didn't affect him at all. Of course it wouldn't, he was half Biju Chakra, half goddess. He wasn't mortal, the divine form should have no effect on him whatsoever. Then his body fell to the ground. But he stayed up in the air. What? Naruto glanced around, surprised. He was floating in the air, and when he looked down, he could clearly see his body collapsed on the ground, unmoving. How was he flying? Did he accidentally form a shadow clone or something? Kurama? What just happened? No reply. Nothing. Something was wrong. Wrong on epic, perhaps even legendary proportions. Naruto had grossly miscalculated something. But what was it? Was it Atlas's divine form? No way. Just to be sure, Naruto looked directly at Atlas. Atlas radiated an intense gray light and waves after waves of power and energy still emanated from him, but other than that, Naruto suffered no ill effects. What the hell? The facts connected in his mind and formed an unpleasant conclusion. His body was on the ground. He was flying even though he wasn't in Six Paths Sage mode. He couldn't hear Kurama. And judging by how even though he was right in front of Atlas's head, Atlas didn't take any notice of him, he was probably invisible to everyone. Existing as nothing but a soul. He may actually be dead. Wait. Was he a ghost right now? First blood in this war, Atlas smirked triumphantly, goes to me. There was a moment of absolute silence. Zoe's eyes widened in shock before sadness filled her gaze. She had already seen too much death in the past few thousand years, though, and was used to it. She took only a second to grieve before a new anger entered her eyes. Congratulations, Atlas, she spat, saying Atlas as if it was particularly foul. You had to resort to using your divine form to kill a mere demigod. Are you proud of yourself? Atlas shrugged. Hey, I was honorable once. Trusted your little boyfriend. Got stabbed in the back for it. I'm not going to make the same mistake twice. A win is a win. Naruto. Artemis spoke up softly, fear and uncertainty in her voice, as if refusing to believe that Naruto was dead. He's dead, Atlas said bluntly, a smirk on his face. Are you going to cry, Artemis? I need a camera for this. I'm alive. Naruto wanted to scream. But even though his mouth moved, no sound came out. He had no physical form. Artemis stared at Naruto's lifeless body hollowly, disbelief slowly turning into despair. No. The look on your face right now is delightful, a ruthless smile spread on Atlas's face. I wonder how you would look when I kill my daughter next. He paused when an intense golden light suddenly flooded the mountaintop, even brighter than his divine form. The air became superheated as some sections of the ruins burst into flames from the blistering heat. Atlas shielded his eyes from the light with his hand, genuine confusion on his face. What in the name of Tartarus? Atlas's eyes widened as the sun grew closer and closer to the top of the peak. Oh, he managed to mutter a single Greek curse before the sun chariot crashed into him, sending dust and rubble flying everywhere as Atlas hit the ground once more. Zoe took advantage of the diversion and quickly sprinted to Artemis's side, kneeling by her. Lady Artemis, she said tentatively. In all her years serving her mistress, Zoe had never seen such a look of despair on Artemis's face. Zoe, Artemis whispered quietly. Please, can you please take my burden? Zoe nodded without hesitation, instantly stepping next to her, bracing herself on one knee, holding up her hands, and touching the cold, heavy clouds. Her muscles protested immediately as an impossibly heavy weight settled upon her form. Artemis slipped out from under the sky, entering her divine form as she did so. She radiated an intense silver light the same color as the moon. A pair of hunting daggers materialized in her hands. The door to the sun chariot, a red Maserati, opened and Apollo stepped out. His expression was deadly serious as he too entered his divine form, radiating an intense golden light the same color as the sun. His eyes blazed with fury and anger as he gazed at Naruto's unmoving body, a hint of sadness and regret in his expression. Atlas recovered quickly, extracting himself from under the sun chariot and leaping out of the crater, his posture defensive as he eyed the twin gods. He backed up a bit to put some distance between them. Hey sis, Apollo greeted quietly. Artemis inclined her head. Apollo, she murmured. Cover me. Apollo nodded as his golden bow materialized in his hand. She initially hadn't wanted to be with Naruto. At all. She had been foolish. When Hestia made her realize her mistake, she thought that it had been too late, that Naruto already hated and resented her for abandoning him. But she was wrong. He defied her expectations and forgave her far easier than he should have. He was much like Hestia in that regard. After that, Artemis had grown to care for Naruto. A lot. She hadn't expected the level of affection she would have for him, but then again, Naruto seemed to have a habit of defying her every expectation and assumption. He was kind. Funny. Respectful, at least to her. Sure, he was a bit loud sometimes and he ate a little too much ramen, but other than that, Artemis genuinely enjoyed being with Naruto. He never failed to brighten up her day and bring a smile to her face. And now, he was dead. Whatever Naruto was, there was no possible way he could have survived seeing Atlas's divine form. His red blood was proof of that. Artemis's only child was torn away from her and she hadn't been able to do a single thing about it. Naruto was gone. Her despair slowly turned into a primal rage as she stalked forward, silver light coating her hunter daggers. She was the huntress, and Atlas was the prey. And it's time she showed him what it's like to be hunted. He paused, his black wings fluttered in agitation. Something felt wrong. He couldn't explain it, but oh well. He'll deal with it later. For now, he has a job to do. Souls to reap, and all that. Unsurprisingly, Thalia was winning. She was the daughter of Zeus, she had Aegis, which constantly broke Luke's concentration and filled him with an irrational fear, and her spear gave her the advantage of range. Not to mention how Luke was probably still recovering from holding up the sky. Luke may be the best swordsman in a century, but against Thalia, he couldn't do anything. He was forced onto the defensive, and hadn't landed a single blow on her so far, whereas Thalia had already inflicted a nasty slice on Luke's leg, blood steadily trickling out. "You've gotten better, Thalia," Luke breathed heavily, his forehead glistening with sweat. Thalia didn't respond, instead charging him again. Yellow lightning gathered at the tip of her spear which she thrusted forward, and Luke's eyes widened before spinning to the side, evading the spear. "Are you trying to kill me?" he demanded incredulously. "You and I both know that it wouldn't have hit you." Thalia narrowed her eyes as she swung her spear in an arc. Luke blocked it with his blade, grunting before stepping forward and punching Thalia in the stomach. Thalia intercepted his fist with her shield and there was a clang as Luke's hand collided with the hard metal. Luke hissed in pain before leaping back, gaining some distance. "Yeah, this isn't working out," he said. "I only came here to try to convince you guys to join me. Not to fight. I'm outta here." Then he turned around and fled, a hole opening in the wall in front of him. Thalia ran after him immediately, Percy and Bianca close behind her. Although Percy had a slightly different objective than Thalia. Thalia wanted to go defeat Luke. Percy just wanted to find Annabeth. "Hey Bianca," he murmured. "If you see a blonde-haired girl with gray eyes, let me know, all right?" Bianca nodded. "Got it." Artemis lunged forward, her form a blur. Atlas met her head-on, blocking her slice with his elbow and attempting to kick her in the chest. Artemis dodged with an unbelievable grace, leaping upwards and flipping over his head, landing behind him. Atlas turned around, and was promptly shot in the back of the head with an arrow that lodged itself in his skull. He growled and pulled it out, and then the arrow exploded, releasing a concussive wall of sound that briefly knocked Atlas off balance. Artemis immediately stabbed him in the stomach with her knife, twisting it, before jumping away once more as Atlas grabbed at her. In the air, she let go of her knives as her silver bow formed in her hand and she unleashed a hail of arrows that slammed into Atlas. Atlas merely sighed, pulling out the arrows, his wounds immediately healing afterwards. And then Artemis was in front of him again, forcing him backwards with a flurry of strikes. She effortlessly dismantled his defenses and constantly cut him over and over again. Apollo interspersed Artemis's strikes with arrows of his own, his aim true every time. They pierced Atlas's skin and afflicted him with symptoms of diseases, necrosis, lesions, spasms, itching, paralysis. However, it was all useless. The wounds on Atlas healed almost immediately after they were inflicted. Apollo cursed under his breath. Atlas's regeneration was notorious. There was a reason why the war between the Titans and the gods lasted 10 whole years, even though there were less than 20 fighters, give or take. Cronus, Atlas, Hyperion, Iapetus, Koios, and Crius versus Zeus, Poseidon, Hades, Hera, Demeter, Hestia, and the 300-handed ones. Quite simply, nobody would stay down. Fatal wounds were healed up in seconds, and each side struggled to come up with a way to permanently incapacitate the other. Fortunately, Apollo didn't have to permanently incapacitate Atlas, he only had to force him back under the sky. And it appeared that despite Artemis's rage, she understood that as well, because she was slowly but surely leading Atlas back to Zoe Nightshade, who was watching the fight intently. "If I were you," Atlas said, "I would just give up," he gurgled as Artemis spun around and sliced his throat. It healed up in a few seconds. "How rude. As I was saying, you should just give up. You're not going to defeat me." Artemis narrowed her silver eyes. "Watch me," she snarled before thrust-kicking him. Atlas stumbled backward and then another arrow slammed into him, a Greek fire arrow this time that blasted him back. Atlas laughed insanely, waving aside the dust. "I haven't had this much fun in a long time." And then he switched to the offensive, a Stygian iron spear appearing in his hand. He advanced, pressing Artemis. She was fast, but his strength was unstoppable. Artemis was well aware that if she was hit by a single strike, then it wouldn't go well for her. Her gaze cold and calculating, she avoided every strike with an effortless grace. She tilted her head to the side to avoid a thrust before performing a back handspring, pushing off her hand and twisting in the air to dodge Atlas's punch. She landed soundlessly before bending back to evade a spear swing. Then Atlas smirked and stomped his foot. The ground shook under them and Artemis briefly lost her footing. Atlas capitalized on the opening immediately and raised his spear to stab down. No. Apollo shot 10 arrows at Atlas at once, but Atlas simply raised his hand and all the arrows were blasted back by a wave of energy. Fortunately, that was long enough time for Artemis to get back onto her feet and disengage. Atlas growled in frustration before charging Artemis again. She stood there, twin daggers at the ready. At the last possible second, she jumped to the side, twisting in the air, blocking Atlas's hasty spear swing, before pushing off a section of the air that suddenly solidified, leaped behind Atlas and kicked Atlas in the back with all her might. She backflipped off as Apollo's arrows curved in the air and slammed into Atlas's back as well. She recognized Greek fire arrows, sonic arrows, arrows filled with his godly power. And then they all detonated in unison. A multicolored explosion of green, gold, and red. The combined momentum and force of Atlas's charge, Artemis's kick, and the explosion was enough to blast Atlas off his feet and send him hurtling forward, straight at Zoe Nightshade. No. Atlas yelled and released another wave of divine energy to cancel out his momentum. He skidded to a stop just a few inches in front of Zoe. He breathed a quick sigh of relief before smiling. That was close. His eyes widened in panic as a golden blur slammed into him, driving a purple sphere into his chest. "How?" he gasped in shock and confusion as the immensely dense sphere of balanced chakra exploded and blew him back. Zoe rolled away instantly as Atlas crashed down to the ground and the sky dropped onto him, crushing him flat. Atlas roared in pain and fury. "No!" he bellowed, shaking the mountain itself. "Not again." But it was too late. Once more, he was trapped underneath the sky. He was forcibly taken out of his divine form by the presence of Auranos, the grey light dying down. A litany of Greek curses flowed out of his mouth. Zoe breathed heavily as her muscles burned. All her attention was focused on the person standing in front of her though. "Naruto?" she breathed. "How?" Artemis materialized in front of them, reverting to her mortal form. "Naruto? You're okay," she froze. Apollo strolled forward as well, grinning. "Good work, Naruto. I honestly thought you died." He paused when he caught sight of Naruto's eyes. "Oh dear. You're not Naruto," Artemis murmured. "You don't feel like Naruto." Her eyes narrowed. "Who are you?" she demanded. Naruto stared at them with red, slitted eyes. His expression was alien and undecipherable, an expression they had never seen on Naruto's face before. He regarded them with a cold wariness instead of his usual warmth. The name's Kurama. His voice was different, deeper. Artemis opened her mouth to speak but stopped when she realized she recognized this aura. It was the exact same one she had felt on the night Naruto had been born. This was him. Artemis snarled in rage, her silver eyes glowing. I see, so that's how it is. You wait until he's dead, and then you take over his body. Is he your mortal vessel? Is that it? Apollo narrowed his eyes. Artemis, are you saying that? Artemis nodded. He's the one that night. Fury entered Apollo's eyes once more as an arrow materialized in his hand and he aimed it at Kurama. You shall die, he promised as golden light gathered at the tip of the arrow. Kurama looked at them both before sighing. All right, 2 things. First off, I don't even know you. Second, Naruto isn't dead. Artemis froze, the slightest bit of hope entering her eyes. What do you mean? Kurama stared at her as if she was a lower life form. He's right there, he said dryly, pointing off to a spot in the air. Can't you sense him? Artemis turned to look but there was nothing there. Her anger returned with a vengeance. Is this a joke to you? She hissed. I swear on the river Styx itself. Artemis, Apollo interrupted, his eyes glowing a little the mist. Soul layer. Artemis frowned but complied as she entered a deeper layer of reality. This was the layer where demigod dreams take place, their astral projection allowing them to go practically anywhere and observe, imperceptible unless someone looked past the mist. This was the layer where the Thanatos collected the souls of the dead, which is why the gods typically referred it to the soul layer, or dream-walking layer. And her eyes widened. Naruto was right there, floating in the air, looking really confused at the proceedings. Naruto? She called. He blinked. You can see me? Artemis smiled in relief and happiness. Yes. I can. Naruto grinned. Awesome. So I have no idea what's happening right now. You didn't die correctly, Apollo laughed. How did you manage that? Naruto smirked. I'm just that good. Is Naruto there? Zoe asked hesitantly. Artemis nodded. His soul is. While Artemis and Apollo could easily enter deeper layers of the mist because they were gods, Zoe's divinity wasn't strong enough. She wasn't a goddess, after all. Currently, Artemis and Apollo occupied both the normal layer and soul layer of reality. It was comparable to being in a pool. If Artemis walked on water, then Zoe could see her from the land. However, if Artemis stepped into the water and it came up to her waist, then both Zoe and Naruto, who was under the surface, could see her. Zoe couldn't see Naruto because the water was reflective, but Naruto could see Zoe. Of course, it was more complicated than that, but that was the gist of it. All right, come down, Apollo commanded. Let's get you back into your body. Naruto nodded and was about to move down but then froze and stared at Apollo suspiciously. For some reason, I don't trust you. Apollo placed his hand on his heart, wounded. What? Why? Naruto thought of all the things he had done to Apollo in the past several days and floated up, putting more distance between them, just in case. No reason, really. Apollo crossed his arms. You realize you'll have to come down someday. Try me, Naruto challenged. Naruto, Artemis said. Naruto relented. Fine. But I expect you to stop him before he tries to eviscerate me. He drifted down and stood in front of his body. Kurama occupied it currently, and even though he couldn't see Naruto, he was staring right at him, probably due to negative emotion sensing or sage mode or something. So how do I return to my body? Naruto asked Apollo. You'll have to kiss yourself, Apollo replied with a straight face. What? Naruto yelled. Apollo nodded, completely serious. Haven't you heard of the powers of the kiss? The legendary Sleeping Beauty was awakened through a kiss. Apollo, Artemis chided. Apollo held her stare for a moment before sighing dejectedly. Fine. So I wanted some blackmail material. Sue me. He rubbed his chin, staring at Naruto. Honestly, I have no idea what to do right now. Aren't you the god of healing? Naruto asked. I mean. Apollo scratched his head. I already gave my son Asclepius jurisdiction over most of my domain of healing. I retained enough power to bring a person back from the brink of death, but the second their soul exits their body and they're actually dead. He shrugged. Ah. You're useless then, Naruto said simply. Apollo's eyes flashed. That's it. Naruto, prepare to face the unbridled wrath of the god Apollo. I shall. You shall what? Artemis cut in dangerously. Apollo paused. I shall. Deliver my threats when you are not standing right next to me. Artemis nodded. Better. Naruto took a deep breath before walking into his body. Hey, it might work. The second his ghostly hand touched his body's chest, there was a flash of silver light. Found her. Bianca yelled. Percy rushed over immediately. Annabeth was in a cell, sitting on a chair. Blonde hair with streaks of gray in it, just like Luke. Gray eyes. She smiled when she saw Percy. Hey seaweed brain. You're late. Annabeth, Percy whispered, relief in his gaze. He looked over the cell. Where's the door? There isn't one, Annabeth answered. They just waved their hand and the bars would appear/disappear. Percy blinked before shrugging and cutting the metal bars with riptide. The celestial bronze sword cut through the steel like butter. Annabeth squeezed through the opening. Where's Luke? She asked. Thalia's fighting him right now, Percy reassured her. Annabeth's eyes widened in shock before she rushed off. She knew Luke too. Bianca asked. Percy hesitated. It's a long story. The three of them ran away from home and survived on the streets together. Then he ran after her, Bianca behind him. They emerged in another circular room, torches lining the walls. Luke had multiple new gashes, one on his arm, another on his side, and another on his lower leg. Thalia was still completely uninjured, fighting like a demon. She was a blur of movement as Luke tried to defend from her onslaught. Percy would have cheered her on if it weren't for the tears in her electric blue eyes. Next to him, Annabeth watched the fight, biting her lip. He's not going to win, her eyes widened as Luke stabbed his sword forward. As expected, Thalia blocked it with her shield. She raised her spear to counter-attack and instead of backing off, Luke snarled and rushed forward. He tilted his head to the side, narrowly avoiding the spear thrust. And then he was inside Thalia's guard. At this close range, her spear was useless. Luke feinted with his sword, Thalia raising her shield to block, and then Luke spun around in a burst of speed and suddenly he was about to cut Thalia's unprotected side. An upward diagonal cleave that would have been lethal. No! Annabeth screamed. Luke hesitated just before he struck. And that was his mistake. Thalia's instincts took over and with an inhuman speed, swung her spear at Luke. The spear shaft crashed into Luke's head and knocked him off his balance, causing his strike to miss and instead slice Thalia's arm. Unfortunately, this caused Thalia's arm to involuntarily twitch. Ordinarily for most humans, this wouldn't be a problem, but for the daughter of Zeus with superhuman strength combined with an ultra-sharp spear. A sickening sound. Red splattering out. An absolute silence descended onto the battlefield. Luke looked down. Thalia's spear had pierced his chest, right over his heart. Blood flowed out, bright red. Arterial blood. So this is the end, huh? He chuckled weakly. Horror filled Thalia's gaze. Luke, no. I didn't mean, Luke. Luke smiled, and for once there wasn't a hint of bitterness or hatred in it. Don't worry, Thalia. He coughed out blood. If he wasn't a demigod, he would surely already be dead. He turned to Annabeth. I'm sorry, Annabeth. Luke looked back at Thalia again, who had tears streaming down her cheeks. Thalia. And he fell back, the spear sliding out of his chest and bright red blood spraying into the air, landing on the ground with a thud. Thalia stood there, frozen, her face grief-stricken. Luke. Annabeth rushed forward, but then stopped when a person suddenly appeared in the middle of the room. No. Not a person. He wore a suit and he had scars on his face, but the power he radiated. He was undeniably a titan. The Titan observed Luke's body with his eyebrows raised. "That's unexpected," he said before turning to them and saying, "Out." Holes opened underneath them again and they dropped into the shadows. Naruto glanced down at his hands before patting himself. Solid. He tried to fly, and nothing happened. "Just to be sure," he called, "Kurama?" "Brat," Kurama replied. "You scared me for a second there." Naruto grinned. He was alive again. "Did it work?" Apollo asked, staring at Naruto critically. "Yup," Naruto responded. "I'm back." His eyes widened as Artemis stepped forward and hugged him. Her small form was trembling slightly. Naruto hugged her back, breathing in her familiar scent. "Ah, this is adorable." "Shut up. I thought I lost you," Artemis whispered. Naruto grinned. "Don't worry. I'm not that easy to get rid of." After a moment, Artemis pulled back and Naruto could have sworn he saw a tinge of gold in the corner of her eye, but the next second it was gone. Naruto exited Kurama Chakra mode and Sage mode, the golden chakra cloak disappearing and his eyes returning to normal. Zoe gasped. Naruto looked at her, confused, before realizing. When he was in Kurama Chakra mode, he had been covered in golden chakra. But now that he was back to normal, Zoe saw his true form, without a henge. Silver eyes. Auburn hair. "That's right," Zoe breathed. "Atlas called you the son of Artemis." She paused, as if afraid to ask the question. "Lady Artemis, is Naruto?" Artemis hesitated for a second before nodding. "Yes. He's my son." Zoe's eyes widened in shock, but before she could say anything, Percy, Bianca, Thalia, and Annabeth appeared out of nowhere. Thalia and Annabeth had tears on their faces. Over what, Naruto didn't know. "Sis, we should leave," Apollo said nervously, glancing around. "I'm getting a bad feeling about this." Artemis nodded. "Very well. Wait," Percy held up his hand. "Before we go. Can I, He gestured at Atlas, who had crawled onto his knees by now. Artemis frowned. "Okay." She nodded, curious to see what Percy would do. Percy grinned before walking forward. They watched him in confusion when he stopped right in front of Atlas. Then kicked him in the face. "You bastard!" Atlas screamed in fury. "I swear, when I get out from under here, I will tear you asunder. I shall make your life a living Tartarus." "That felt good," Percy beamed. The others looked at each other before looking at Artemis and Apollo with hopeful glances. After a moment, Apollo chuckled. "Just one each, okay." Naturally, none of them obeyed him. They were in Apollo's sun chariot, transformed into a small bus to fit all of them. Artemis and Naruto sat next to each other, and Artemis held Naruto's hand tightly, as if afraid he would suddenly disappear if she let go. Naruto could sense the others had questions. Zoe seemed ready to burst. He had quite a lot of explaining to do. Later. For now, Naruto simply wanted to enjoy Artemis's presence again. Just for a minute. It happened with Zoe's thread as well. Oh gods, it's spreading. What do we do? What can we do? Nico walked away triumphantly. Negotiations had gone very well. He stopped for a moment, closing his eyes and immortalizing the memory. He smiled. Gods, being a demigod was awesome. "Hey, Kurama." "Yeah, Naruto? It's time for us to bullshit the absolute sage out of everyone. I'm talking about Kakashi-sensei level bullshit here." Kurama grinned. "Sounds fun." That's it for part 5. Thank you for watching and see you on the next video.